Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. We are officially live for the second day back. Thank you all for being here. We have got so much to talk about and so much to get into as we get back into the groove of covering global capital equity markets. Yes, I'm 1 minute late. At this point, I could be 5 minutes early and everyone would still say I'm late. So honestly, at that point, I just decide to be late and let all the people that are spamming late be happy that they're right, that they're late. Also helps me out because then the expectations are lower. But anyway, we're here. We're live. I woke up pretty early today. You know, my sleep schedule has actually been really good. I think sleeping on the flight back from Singapore really did me a solid because last night I slept at like 10 o'clock, woke up at 4:30 today. So I'm feeling very refreshed, got a lot of work done in the morning, but because I woke up so early in the morning, it was actually, it was no alarm clock. It was the easiest thing to wake your ass up and go figure out what the hell is going on. I woke up to a lot of red. Some of that red has been resolved a little bit. As you can see, some of those green candles popping up on the S&P 500. We were below 740. This news came out at around 5 a.m. because Trump was in Turkey and he was talking with the Secretary General of NATO. And, well, he said some things that caused the market to go down. Oil spiked up 5%. Oil's now up 3%. So we've had a little bit of recovery from the worst of what happened early in the morning. But if you were up early or if you were, coming back from work at around 5 p.m. Across the world, then you probably saw the news. And the news is that Trump made a comment. I think there's a lot of nuance to this comment that makes you kind of think it's not really real, but also makes you think like it could be real. My gut tells me what he's saying right here is not actually real, and we'll talk about why. But if it were to be real, the implication of his comments, obviously market's going to go red. And so we're seeing that right now in the pre-market. We'll talk about some of those comments. You also have a bunch of different deals in the morning. Broadcom signed a $30 billion deal with Apple. The fact that Broadcom's only up $1 after signing a $30 billion multi-year deal with Apple just shows how aggressive these comments were from Trump. And Broadcom was actually down after that deal was announced because they came after the Trump comments. And now it's slightly trying to get back up. But yeah, these comments definitely didn't help out in terms of how the market has been perceiving it. So let's get into it. We got a lot to get into. It'll be a long day trying to figure out how the market thinks of these comments. And maybe, just maybe, if things get bad enough, Trump will reverse some of the stuff he said. If not, then I guess we are once again playing this game. Also, we had a bunch of things happen in the context of Iran last night that led to these comments this morning. So they kind of go hand in hand, and we'll have to analyze how the market might ultimately think of it. All right, let's get into it. Chels, Akshay, what's up, what's up, what's up? Tesla Granny, thank you for being here. John, Peter, Martin, good morning. I'm Beneficial, what's up? Kevin, good to see you. Good to see you as well, Kevin. I am happy to be back, excited to be back. It's been a long week. George, Shem Pasta, Zam, Vin. It is time. It is officially time to get back to analyzing this market. And, as soon as you get back, you have so much to discuss. We have earnings in about a week. So the fact that we have so many different things going on, there's never a dull day in terms of figuring out how to navigate these markets. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to go straight into what Trump said this morning, and it'll piggyback off what the U.S. Central Command did last night, and we'll probably give a decent explanation for why we are red today.
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
When he means it's over, the question was, do you think the ceasefire is over? And Trump is saying, yeah, I think it's over.
Speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. We make a deal. And if I make a deal with him, we have a deal. And he goes out, he talks. We make a deal. Everyone's agreed. No nuclear weapon. We make a deal. They go outside, talk to the press. They say, we never even talked about it. There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
Talks won't resume after we get through the funeral proceedings.
What?
Does this mean that talks with Iran will not resume?
I don't care. They can talk. but I think they're wasting their time. They're a bunch of lying guys. I do my whole life. That's all I do is deals. My whole life that's how I became president. I guess that's a deal too, right? But I made a lot of money. I had a lot of great success, tremendous success. Everything I did, I was successful. And I deal with these guys, and I say, this is from a different school. They're liars. They're cheats. They're sick people. They've hurt their people. They killed 54,000 people as of now that were protesting. You know, when people say, how come they haven't taken over? They can't take over because they're dead. They killed them. Nobody's going to take over. They have no guns, and the other side has machine guns. And they're killing them. The press doesn't report it.
So obviously those comments got the market pretty upset. Again, if you were up early, you saw instant red candles. I mean, Nebius was getting close to going below 180. ARM was below 285. You had Broadcom in the 360 range. S&P 500 was below 740. This little bounce that we're seeing right now is because of these reports by Reuters. Basically, you just heard Trump say the deal is over, or he believes the deal is over. But the problem is, or I guess the good thing about this is Trump didn't actually confirm that. So even the way that he talked about it, right? He was like, I think it's over. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's over. They're scum. We don't want to talk with them. But then in terms of actually, you know, making that real, Reuters was reporting that Trump did not repeat criticism of Spain, which he also criticized Spain, that we'll take a look at in a second, to his allies in private. To the NATO leader summit meeting. Trump did not repeat the termination of the interim deal with Iran during the NATO summit, and Trump did not mention Greenland during the NATO summit. So everything he said to the press a few hours ago, which is what caused the market to, at least in the pre-market, really start to take a tumble, he didn't actually say that in closed doors with the people that matter. So I think right now it's a bet, and I don't know who's going to be right or wrong about this, but the market's trying to figure out, okay, so he just said the deal is over after 3 weeks ago, we signed this historic negotiation framework, which caused the markets to really do well in the middle of June, and ended out the best quarter we've had since 2020 for Q2 in 2026. But now he's saying that the deal is done and there is no deal, and like we don't want to negotiate with them. Is this similar to when Trump said he was going to bomb Kharg Island? Is this similar to when Trump said, you know, we will destroy a civilization? Like, he's said all these hyperbolic, crazy things before, and then a day later, sometimes hours later, he puts out a Truth Social post saying, well, I've changed my mind, or I've had good conversations with the king of Saudi Arabia, yada, yada. And then boom, markets immediately pump, which is what happened a couple Thursdays ago when he said he's not going to bomb Kharg Island anymore. So when you think of it from that perspective, is this just another one of those moments where Trump says something crazy, like the ceasefire is over, which objectively, that's crazy, bro. Like, we went through, like, they literally in France with Macron, he signed the freaking treaty, made it a big deal. Like, all right, we're going to, you know, come to this conclusion. We have these 15 bullet point lists. We're going to integrate Iran into the global economy. We're going to have, you know, $300 billion of a reconstruction fund. And now it's like the ceasefire is over. Like, it is so hard for me to seriously believe that that's true. And by the way, if it actually is over, forget the stock market, oil is going to go back up. And if oil is going to go back up, yes, stocks are going to be in a bad situation, but I don't understand how the midterms are going to do friendly for Trump. I mean, the fact that we got oil below 70 by July 4th, which is what Trump kind of wanted to do for America 250, get oil prices to come down. Are we really going to go back and fight Iran and get rid of the entire ceasefire? How is oil not going to explode if we do that? How is the Fed not going to raise rates if we do that? Because 9 out of the 18 Fed members already want to raise rates, even with oil at around that $85 range. So if we actually end up spiking oil based on the ceasefire being over, it would be really bad for the midterms. It would be really bad for stocks, and it would be really bad for regular people in the economy because the Fed would raise rates. So I don't see how we actually go down the path of Trump going back into war, because the implication of it outside of just the stock market is horrible in every other way you can theorize about it. So to me, I feel like this is Trump once again. And again, this is just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe Trump is serious, and he's like, you know what? He's going to make a case that says, hey, for the next 6 months, we just have to go into Iran. We have to do a full regime change because the entire administration at that point, we just can't agree with them. Like, you know, we stayed for decades in Iraq. Maybe that's what Trump is getting ready to do. I just find that hard to believe, given all the progress we've made over the past couple of months to at least get to somewhat of a framework of a deal. And if that happens, stock market's gone for this year. I mean, like, you know, we're going to have a red year because oil's going to spike. The Fed's going to raise rates. You already have all this AI bubble, semiconductor fear. Like, earnings are not going to be enough to overcompensate for that. So I would assume the more bullish take is that Trump wants to keep the stock market up. He wants to keep oil prices down, and that's not going to happen. But I think that is going to be the central question of how the market theorizes for his comments. And this is what he said about Spain this morning as well.
And I want to thank Mark. He's been a great Secretary General of NATO. I'm not happy with NATO because of what they did with Greenland. And I'm not happy with NATO because of the fact that they didn't want to help us with the #1 state sponsor of terror. That's Iran. They were unwilling to help us. Now, in all fairness, I didn't speak to Mark about it. I think if I did, it might have been different. But we didn't need help. But I was really testing. I wanted to see whether or not they'd be there. And the answer is they were. I spoke to Germany. I spoke to France. Spoke to UK. Spoke to Italy. I didn't speak to Spain. Spain is a wasted cause. We don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore, by the way. I'd like you to cut it off. Spain is a terrible partner in NATO. They don't participate. They don't pay. I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off.
So again, he said that in the morning in private. He didn't actually reaffirm those statements, which is part of the reason why we got the little bit of spike from the pre-market lows. Essentially, Reuters was reporting, hey, Trump might have said this publicly, but in private, he doesn't actually believe it. Will the market take that seriously when we get into the market open? We're going to find out in the next 20 minutes. Trump is actually live right now with Zelensky. He's taking some questions. Let's pull over to that and see what he's saying.
But we'll see how it all works out. No, I'm not happy with them. It's like, for instance, we'll have a meeting and we'll talk about the denuclearization of Iran, because that's what the war is. It's not a war. It's really the denuclearization of Iran. And we'll have a meeting and we'll talk about just that. That's because my whole thing is not about regime change. It's not about, although I think it's regime change when you knock out the first group, the second group, and now you're at the, I think that's maybe the ultimate regime change. But that's not what it's about. It's about, we don't want them to have nuclear weapons. And it's denuking or denuclearization. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And they'll get out of the room. We'll talk about it like we're here. They'll agree on everything. And then they'll go and have a news conference and say, we never even talked about it. They're cuckoo. There's something wrong with these people. And for 47 years, they've been the bully of the Middle East. And they're not the bully anymore. They're not the bully anymore. And all we want, it's very simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. That's what I'm there for.
President Trump, sir. President Trump.
If they did, they'd use it, and we're not going to let that
President
happen.
Trump, sir.
Daniel?
You've made a career making deals in very challenging situations. Speaking to President Zelensky, speaking to President Putin, in your view, sir, what is the most pragmatic pathway forward to finding a long-term peace deal?
I just think they're going to make a deal. Look, this deal has been in the works for a long time. It's got the pluses, the minuses. They know what it is. He knows what it is better than anybody. And I just think it's sometimes, I used an analogy, and it sounds simple, but it's sort of true. You have two kids in a park, and they don't like each other, and they start fighting. Sometimes you have to let them fight. Let them see that it's tough. It's tough. Fighting is tough. And
all right, so that is Trump with Zelensky right now. Trump also said, we didn't get to see this, it was a few minutes early, but he said, I'm probably going to hit Iran hard tonight. It's not about regime change, it's about nuclear weapons. We will probably hit them again tonight. So Trump foreshadowing attacks that are likely going to happen. Now, the reason for why I think Trump is being so aggressive in terms of his vernacular around Iran is based on the fact that Iran hit 3 vessels over the past 48 hours. And the reason for why they hit those vessels were because they were upset at what route the vessels were taking through the Strait of Hormuz. They were going down the Oman corridor versus the Iranian route. And they struck. And they also struck an LNG tanker that the Qataris own. So the U.S. Sent Command said yesterday that we have begun launching a series of powerful strikes against Iran to impose heavy costs for targeting and attacking commercial shipping crew by innocent civilians. The U.S. strikes are in response to Iranian attacks on 3 commercial vessels that were transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's demonstrated aggression was unwarranted, dangerous, and a clear violation of the ceasefire. And that is why, to an extent, you might have some level of belief in what Trump is saying. So when he says, I'm done with them and the ceasefire is over, because both the U.S. and Iran have actually attacked each other over the past 48 hours, he might be saying the truth and making the case that says, look, we've already both violated the ceasefire. So the ceasefire is done for what we're concerned about. The problem is the actual implication of the ceasefire being over with and not having a deal, or at least a framework of a negotiation of a deal, is that like oil's going up and the market's going down. Like the implication is so bad because these oil markets that are already trying to recover from a lack of supply and from refineries across the Middle East that have gotten hit. By the way, if we get back into a war with Iran, they're taking down Kuwait with them. They're taking down Qatar with them. They're taking Saudi Arabia down with them. Like they will attack the proxies, Iraq, and we're just going to have to deal with that. And we haven't really done a good job dealing with it over the past couple months because every time they've fired against one of our allies in the Middle East, we haven't been able to do anything about it. Like, it's not like we decided to take over Karg Island or something. And every time we even got close to thinking that was going to happen, which would, officially start a full-on boots on the ground operation, Trump ends up tacoing and saying, I'm not going to do that. And guess what? The market pumps, oil goes down, and we're back to business. So if we end up going the opposite direction and the true implication of what Trump is saying right here is manifested, like, I just don't see how it's bullish. But every time you think we're going to go down that route, he tacos. So it's like, let's do a poll right here in the chat. I mean, even the way that he's saying these comments doesn't, in my opinion, make it feel like he's serious. But if he were to be serious, the implications are bad. It's just, again, do you actually think he's going to be serious? Let's get a little bit more coverage on this, and then we'll get into some of the AI news that happened last night in regards to South Korea.
Yeah, good to see you and Kelly. Thanks, Joe. Look, let's put this in context. Everybody who's here, every one of the 31 other nations plus the EU, they knew that the president had the ability to put a curveball or two into this event as well. But I'd say they were ready for a couple. They were ready for criticisms over spending. That's why they spent a whole day yesterday just down the road here saying to the US president, we are spending on this, this, and this, whether it's Raytheon, whether it's Lockheed, whether it's the European players. We are spending a lot of money redressing your very legitimate concerns about EU spending and the heavy lifting from the US. They were ready for concerns about what the EU and what NATO had done regarding supporting over Epic Fury. Again, they were ready to face down that and said, look, they can be part of the navigation opening when the MOU is extended, which of course it's not going to be at the moment as well. What they weren't ready for was the fact that the president said, we're not going to trade with Spain anymore. That is $46 billion worth of bilateral trade between Spain and the US. They weren't ready for the president to say, oh, yeah, by the way, we should control Greenland again. And I spoke to the Danish prime minister, of course, the country which controls Greenland, and she said, look, we will invoke Article 5 against anyone who tries to militarily take. And I said, is that foe and ally? She said, against anyone. Article 5, of course, is where you enact mutual protection from your allies as well. But the biggest blow up of this entire meeting, of course, was those comments which we've drilled down on all morning, which the markets are paying attention to, and that is the end of the MOU as far as the president is concerned. Do we need to take it with a pinch of salt? Will the negotiators still be able to come up with some deal where both the US negotiators and the Qataris, the Egyptians, the Saudis, and the Turks as well? That remains to be seen. But it is those latest comments from the president that have blown up this meeting. Back to
It really, again, does feel like Trump is saying it to get more leverage to negotiate, just like he said all those comments about blowing up a civilization and taking over Karg Island. And, I feel like you have to have that as the default belief, because every time you believed he was serious about fully going into war and like stopping any of the progress on negotiations, it doesn't happen, right? There is some reversal that he comes up with to justify why things are okay. So I think that's probably going to be how this plays out again, because the implications, if it doesn't, are just really bad. And I think Trump understands the implications of it being really bad, but the market's going to have to figure out today how bad that could end up being as we get into the month of July. Speaking of the month of July, it has started off with momentum taking a pretty big hit. So let's get into some of this AI news. South Korea's Kospi, which is essentially two companies that are holding up the entire country's index, Samsung and SK Hynix, is now down 20% from its highs. Last night, it fell 5%. Samsung, after that record quarter, 19x year-over-year growth in operating income, now more profitable than NVIDIA at $58 billion of operating income. That was down 6.25%. And then SK Hynix, which is going to be listing on the NASDAQ this Friday, raising about $29.8 billion from U.S. investors. That stock was also down 5.68%. So the implications of that obviously have led to the momentum names in the United States taking a big hit. Micron right here at 907. Micron got all the way to 880 pre-markets at the height of the pain from the Trump comments, 875 right there. And now you're getting a recovery at 907. And, yesterday we got all the way back up to 940 after falling below 900. Then at around 2 p.m., we had that news around Iran striking and the U.S. striking back, and that sent it right back down. And overall, it's just been a very, very choppy month, or very, very choppy start to the month for July. And you can see this in some of the data in regards to how momentum is getting hit. So high beta momentum, this is from Goldman Sachs right here, is now surpassed 20% declines over the past 5 days. The magnitude of a sell-off at such velocity has not been seen since 2020, when the stay-at-home versus go-outside narrative shifted meaningfully towards reopening. So this is Goldman Sachs' high beta momentum indicator. Now, July historically tends to really suck for these momentum stocks. It's good for tech stocks in general, but the past 5 years it's been bad for momentum stocks. And the first week of July, we are seeing that momentum volatility really not reward the dip buyers. Like every time you've taken an opportunity to say, all right, I'm going to step in and buy a little bit right here. Maybe intraday you get a little bit of recovery, but the next day, the next week, it's ended up not being the best. And so it begs the question, which is the question that's on everyone's mind, is the AI trade over? And I think this is a question that people are going to be asking for a very long time to be able to figure out exactly, when this thing officially gets done with, or if it even has the chance to get done with anytime soon. And the data, at least in terms of the epicenter of what keeps the AI trade alive, does not seem to signal that it's going to be over. Bank of America, they come out with new projections this morning. They cranked up their CapEx estimates for the next 3 years for Google, Meta, and Amazon. The collective CapEx between the three hyperscalers are now estimated at $705 billion in 2027 and $816 billion in 2028. But that is actually bearish if you ask Semi-Analysis. So Semi-Analysis came out with a report this morning on Anthropic. Again, Anthropic confidentially filed for IPO, which means we don't have access to their numbers, but Semi-Analysis did. This is kind of the whole point of their business, try to track what the numbers look like and see what these numbers could be. They came out with an article today, and they believe Anthropic is going to do $1 billion in profit in Q3 before they go public. So when those financials actually do come out on the S1, people will be able to see a profitable company. And they're projecting Anthropic will be priced as the first $6 trillion company in AI as a base case possibility if they continue to execute. So you have all the hyperscalers spending more on CapEx. You have Amazon that just raised $25 billion of bonds yesterday, which is, guess what, going to go into more CapEx, which means all the semiconductor names are going to be the beneficiaries of that capital. And then you've got one of the leading foundation model companies, which is kind of holding up them and OpenAI, the entire AI trade, because they are so much of the backlog for all these different hyperscalers cloud computing agreements, essentially projected to be profitable. And if they actually do end up being profitable, it seems like there's going to be not necessarily a vibe shift in the short term, but at least more confirmation that yes, AI is profitable and this CapEx is delivering an ROI.
Well, obviously, Anthropic in Q2 is profitable. Their net income profitable, excluding stock-based compensation. And I think by Q3, they may even be profitable, including stock-based compensation. That's like how profitable they're getting. And their margins on an Opus token, at least Opus 4.8 token, is like north of 80% for the API price. They've got a lot of deals where their total corporate gross margins gets clawed down a little bit because of like how they do Bedrock deals and Vertex deals and things like that. But ultimately, their per token margin is so high. Well, then if you don't have they have the capability to pay. Ultimately, every GPU they buy at above market rate, they also bought GPUs at above market rate from SpaceX, which is below the rate of Google, but that's because they signed earlier. It's something that, other companies, maybe a venture-backed company or a company that's not really got positive margins, can't necessarily do, right? What is the cost-benefit ratios? Like every GPU I rent, because I'm out of compute capacity, I can immediately turn around and sell tokens on it, or every TPU or every Trainium, I can immediately sell tokens on it at a positive margin. And if I'm running 75% gross margin and I double the cost of the compute, it's fine. I'm still running 50% gross margin. And spinning up more compute nodes is not really necessarily a human requiring task for them if they're renting them. And so ultimately, it's like, well, my NOI still goes up, right? And so I'm going to rent GPUs at whatever price, at some level, whatever price I want to pay, I can pay.
Now, the reason this is really important to understand is because what has been the conversation over the past couple of weeks? It's been open source models and open source models taking away market share from Anthropic and OpenAI because they're cheaper. The fact that Anthropic is able to create a net income profit, excluding SBC, given the massive, like hundreds of billions of dollars that they're spending on compute, it is pretty incredible, right? It means that they're able to squeeze out a margin, and that margin is leading them to profitability. And, for them to go public and actually be net income, like GAAP net income profitable, I think would be a really good sign for investors that obviously want the IPO to be successful. However, if the open source models start taking a lot of share away from Anthropic because they have a margin and people don't want to keep paying that margin, and that margin ends up collapsing because people leave, then that would be bad for Anthropic. The reason I thought the projection of them being profitable going into IPO is so important is because what if people can't leave because their model is just that much better? And I think that's kind of the punchline right here. Like if their model simply is that much better, that people could have a open source option that is 15x cheaper, but it's still not as good at automating all the workflows and having all the agentic instances of what an enterprise or company wants to do versus what Anthropic's frontier model does, whether it's Fable 5 or whatever new model comes after that, then there is a world in which people end up paying the extra cost, even though there's been so much conversation about people not wanting to pay that cost. So I think those two narratives are going to fight back and forth. And as of now, the narrative that people are still willing to pay for Anthropic, even with the costs per token being high, which those costs will eventually come down and Anthropic still will be able to squeeze out a margin simply because they have the volume, should be good for the IPO. And all of us, no matter how much you love Dario, hate Anthropic, love Anthropic, we need that IPO to be successful. Like, SpaceX IPO failing, I don't think could crash the stock market. It could definitely create some pain. I don't think it destroys the stock market or destroys the AI trade. Anthropic not being successful, I think it would really hurt the AI trade. Like you need to show that there can be some profitability if the foundation model is spending all this money. And again, the argument can be that, AI will still exist without Anthropic. It's like, sure, but a lot of the RPO of an Oracle or a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon is coming from Anthropic and OpenAI. So if they're not paying that money, the hyperscalers and their long-term agreements, those start to not become as juicy, and the hyperscalers will be fine. They'll survive that. But at its core, all of that money that Google gets from an Anthropic goes into the supply chain of SMH. And that is what so many people are levered up on, whether it's Marvell or Qualcomm or Micron or all these different companies. And so I don't think structurally that narrative changes, even if open source starts to pick up more momentum. I think there's going to be a duality of it, but you want Anthropic to win. It's just a question of, how easily are they going to be able to win if their token costs continue to, be as high as they are, which allows them to squeeze out the margin. And if open source starts to get a lot more momentum. Speaking of open source, Meta was supposed to be the initial open source AI LLM company, and they've officially gone to closed source, and they just released their latest closed source model, which is Meta Muse Video. It is already ranked number 3 against ByteDance's Seedance and Gemini's OmniFlash, which is pretty damn impressive for Meta, because once again, it's showing that they are actually using their compute for a reason. They're not just using their compute to sell compute. They're using their compute to build frontier models that will be initially adopted potentially by the 4 billion people that they have using their products and services. And as a result of that, Meta stock was up yesterday, hit almost 630. Broadcom right there up about 1.5%. We'll talk about that Broadcom deal in a second. But then Meta went down because Trump said that the Iran ceasefire is over. So, everything Meta has been doing over the past couple of days, to me, is positive, whether it's the compute narrative, whether it's Meta Muse Spark models, whether it's these new image models, like they're justifying the CapEx spend, not necessarily through the ROI in something outside of advertising, which I think the street just doesn't care about right now, but at least in all these different headlines that they're going after and trying to see if that's enough to get people excited about the stock. Semi-analysis, again, thinks that Meta is going to have $200 billion of CapEx in 2027. They're doing 145 in 2026. I think, and this sucks to say as a Meta shareholder, but I do think it's very possible Meta's trying to do whatever they can do to pump up the stock. They're going to try to have a really good earnings, get this thing to 700, and then they're going to do exactly what Google did with the $85 billion equity issuance, because that $200 billion needs to come from somewhere if they're going to be spending it on CapEx. But the point is, if Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, these guys are continuing to reaffirm how much they were spending on CapEx, every time I think of, okay, the semi-AI trade is over, all the earnings on those semiconductor names are going to go higher because they're going to have a backlog of a ton of capital from this CapEx coming into them. Again, you've got projections of 10 trillion of CapEx going into 2030 for what this AI build out will be like. And then, think about it from a first principles perspective. If you have agents, like the simple one sentence thesis is, if you have agents doing everything for everybody across the entire world, you're going to need a lot of compute. And that's just one narrative to the, full self-driving narrative and robotic narrative. So, when you put all those things together and you believe in the optimistic version of what that world looks like, it's probably hard to say we're going to have an overbuild, which means these dips end up becoming opportunities. But once again, does the market have the sentiment to feel that these are an opportunity in the midst of how much they've run already? SMH, NVIDIA is up 3% year to date. SMH, the ETF with everything along with NVIDIA in the semiconductor ecosystem, is up now 55%. At one point, it was up 80% year to date. So if this thing were to end out, a measly 35% and go down 20% from here, it would still be a phenomenal year and we'd massively be outperforming many of the other indices that are out there. But theoretically, it would create a lot of pain because a lot of people have been levered up into SMH. And obviously, that's also what's happening with South Korea. A lot of pain right there because there's just a lot of leverage in the system around Kospi. Pang had a really good earnings yesterday. Pang is another company in the memory space. They deserve to be up 8%, blew away expectations. Again, the memory names should be having good earnings, and Pang had a good earnings. Micron had a good earnings. Samsung had a phenomenal earnings. I would imagine those earnings are only going to get better and better over the next few months. It is a question of if the market feels that these names deserve to be trading at 20, 30 times versus 5 to 7 times, which I think there's a healthy balance, and that healthy balance probably puts Micron closer to 1,500. You had Bank of America reiterate their stance on Micron this morning. They said it's our top pick, and we believe that memory is now a structural part of the supply chain when it comes to CapEx. It's about 48% of the hyperscalers' CapEx is memory, which is unbelievable, but it also makes sense given how much more memory that we need. And so I think that's the argument for why people would buy the dip, but obviously the volatility right here has definitely hurt a lot of people over the past couple of weeks. Broadcom's up 2%, so they signed a deal with Apple. This is very confusing to me versus Intel, because Broadcom or Apple was supposed to sign, I thought Apple did sign a blockbuster deal with Intel to develop the next generation of their chips. And apparently today it ends up happening with Broadcom instead. Broadcom is a $30 billion deal, and they're going to be providing custom chips to design and produce custom silicon and wireless products. You can see right here from Bloomberg, the agreement covers 15 billion US-made chips, with Broadcom investing 1.5 billion to expand its Fort Collins, Colorado facility. Broadcom should be up a lot more on this. I mean, $30 billion deal with Apple is a pretty big number over the next 3-4 years. And this is, after the earnings, so you couldn't say this is necessarily priced in. It's only up about 2.2%. If this sort of sentiment reverses from what Trump said this morning, if you're just joining, Trump said he thinks the ceasefire is over. That is why we are red. I would expect Broadcom to get a little bit of love, but then again, it might just be pumping to get dumped at the open like it has many times before. Baba released preliminary earnings. That's why they're up 10%. This is the best day for Baba in over 2 years in the pre-market. We're going to see if this can hold out going into the market opened. Sentiment improved on reports that Alibaba's cloud AI growth accelerated and its AI services were consolidated under the Qwen brand, which is one of the largest open source models as well. And the same report said China is now consuming about 140 trillion tokens per day, up more than 1,000x in 2 years. So, I mean, look, Baba's cheap. We all know it's cheap. It's always had the China headwind on it. But the amount of cash they have versus their market cap, their growth has not been the best compared to the Max 7 in the United States. But, I mean, there's not that many cloud providers in China that manage the scale of compute that Baba does. And so it makes sense for this one to get a little bit more of a pump right here. So that one is green. Mamba, thank you for the super chat. Admit, I don't understand open source. Do these low-cost models subsidize now with plans to charge more later? What would be the incentives to do this? From my understanding, the open source revolution is rooted in on-prem building of data centers locally. AKA, I'm just gonna make this up. If you're Pfizer and you want to develop a new and you want to use a ton of compute to develop a proprietary model that would help you do drug discovery, then instead of using Anthropic's API and having all your information being sent to Anthropic and using their cloud computing agreements with Google or Amazon or whatever, you would build your own cluster of GPUs. You would run local models that are hopefully just as good as Anthropic or OpenAI, in which you have full governance and security of the data that's being run on that compute. The cost of those tokens would be cheaper because the tokens are being processed closer to the compute itself, aka it's not going to some faraway data center and then coming back. And as a result of that, you would own the entire sovereignty of your stack when it comes to AI. Now, the pushback against that narrative is people don't want to do that. They just want to, there's a reason we went from on-prem to cloud over the past 20 years, and we've had that revolution. The The difference is in a world of AI where these models are being trained and there's recursive feedback loops based on the data that your company, which is proprietary data, very valuable data in the context of Pfizer, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of data, you're lending out to these model companies, and they're really not giving you much other than a model to process them, a large language model. If an open source version can do it 70, 80% as good as them, why don't you own the entire sovereignty of that stack? Now, enterprises will have to commit to that vision in order to actually go through with that versus just signing up for, an Anthropic API hosted by GCP. But that's kind of the idea. And I think the reason a lot of enterprises are starting to think of that is because, again, they feel like they're getting screwed by OpenAI and Anthropic. And that's kind of what Karp was talking about last week as well. So if that does happen, Morgan Stanley actually had a note on this today. They said if this were to happen, it would be bearish for the foundation models, but it would not be bearish for compute because you still need more compute even if you run open source models, which, again, we talked about this yesterday. It wouldn't be the best for OpenAI's margins, but it would still not change anything for Dell. By the way, Dell got an upgrade today to $500. JP Morgan sat down with Michael Dell at a conference yesterday, and they said, yeah, we think Dell is going to keep winning. And reading through this report, once again, you kind of think these dips end up becoming opportunities. So key points, they said, supply remains the bottleneck. Dell said demand remains well ahead of supply. And if they could procure more supply, there would likely be more upside to expectations. Current AI demand appears durable, and Dell believes it should persist over the foreseeable future as AI infrastructure spending is increasingly tied to broader enterprise ROI, not just IT budget growth. So the CapEx actually is, being pitched as a way to get a return on investment, not just to modernize the IT stack of an organization. Enterprise AI demand continues to broaden as customers move beyond proof of concepts and rethink workflows, headcount, and software spend and infrastructure. Dell now has 5,000 enterprise AI factories in production, up more than 50%. And then the case for on-prem. Management reiterated that it believes on-prem inference can drive the lowest cost per token as workloads are run closer to where the data is created while reducing reliance on frontier models for every use case. And, Dell has had multiple partnerships with a bunch of different companies to enable that on-prem ecosystem of infrastructure. One of those partnerships was with Palantir last month. And so Evercore is like, hey, Dell remains one of the best positioned infrastructure vendors in the AI cycle. We raise our target to 500. Now, I don't know from a valuation perspective if Dell is an amazing buy at 500, but the point is the demand supply imbalance is what I care about more. And it looks like these sell side guys are not giving up on the thesis that we are still supply constrained. And Trump loves it as well. That's true. He did say to buy Dell the other day. So I don't know. As soon as we woke up, Trump kind of shook up the markets as he usually does by saying that he thinks the ceasefire is over. For those that are just joining, that was the big headline. Obviously not bullish, but I also just think it's classic Trump being Trump. And it's one of those things where you buy that dip and potentially get some ceasefire headline and sell the rip if that ends up happening. But how many times is the market really going to fall for the same trick, I think is the bigger question. 70% of you say that Trump will change his mind on the Iran ceasefire being over. I would tend to agree with those 70%. Trump on the Ukraine and drone deal says, I think we're going to make that deal. Trump says we would buy their drones and missiles from Ukraine. I think, is he still live with Zelensky? But he has been live over the past 20 minutes. No, he's not live anymore. No, he still is live. Wow. Okay, so he's been live for a while now. And real quick, and then we'll get into these last couple of stories as we get into the market open.
I guarantee in case it is. But with Iran, 47 years, this should have been done by another president a long time ago, or somebody else, another country. But they got stronger and stronger, and now they're weak.
Are you going to reimpose the naval
Don't
blockade
forget,
on
we
Iranian
knocked out
ports?
159 ships in 1 week. That's good even for you, right? 159. Their entire navy is at the bottom of the sea. And now they have little boats, little tiny boats that go around. And we knocked about 28 of them out last night with the same weapon we use for the drug people. Drugs are down, by the way. Drugs by sea are down 97%, meaning nobody wants to get into those boats and take drugs into it. They're down 97%. And we're using the same thing for the mine boats. They like to drop mines in. And we hit a lot of them last night, like 28. We knocked out 28 boats last night, little ones. That's all they have is little ones.
Are you going to try to take out more tonight?
Will we go tonight? You know, normally I wouldn't tell you. But you know what? There's not a thing they can do about it. So the answer is probably.
President Trump.
Terrible military strategy. He just said he's going tonight. Yeah,
President
they deserve it.
All right. So if markets end up going green today in the midst of Trump saying that he's going to get ready to attack, then I guess they're somewhat trying to price it in. If we end up going red, then there you go. There's your reason. Trump saying we are going to attack. Oil is at 73 right now. It's actually almost at 74, 73, 78. I mean, we worked so hard to get this thing below 70. If this thing actually rips back up into the 90s, which again, I find really hard to believe, but if it were to happen, I just wonder how stocks handle that. Because the problem is, if that happens, the Fed already wants to hike outside. I feel like Warsh is the only guy who doesn't want to hike. If you have oil at anywhere near 100, you're going to have a hell of a reason for those Fed members to campaign for a hike. Again, I just don't think that's going to, I feel like Trump is just saying this shit and he doesn't actually mean it because he knows the implication of this is horrendous in so many different ways. It's just, is the market going to believe it today? And here is potentially a reason that the market is not believing anything that he's saying. Take a look at this chart right here. The S&P put call skew just collapsed to 0.71. This is the lowest reading on record. Buying protection for a crash is essentially free because no one wants it. No one wants insurance. Now, we looked at this back in March. What happened in March? The put call skew was at a 4-year high. What does that mean? That means that everyone was preparing for a crash. What happened in March? Well, we got a little bit of a crash, 9% down, but a lot of that put call skew ended up happening towards the end of March, which was the bottom, because when everyone is prepared for a crash, you tend to not get a crash. Now, everyone is not prepared for a crash because buying put and put premiums are at the lowest they've been in 10 years. This is going back to May 2016. And that could potentially imply that there is more volatility coming up because people aren't expecting that volatility since everyone is so bulled up. So this is actually one of the data points that was instrumental in March to determine how much bearish sentiment was there. And I think now it's another data point to explain how much bullish sentiment is there as we get into the life cycle of managing some of this momentum going into July. Is Iran pumping right here? Iran is up 3.3. I do not have news for it. Do we finally have a deal? Iran 3.35. Nebius and CoreWeave are not up. This is 2 minutes before the open. So this has to be Iran specific. Do not see a deal. I do not see news. The only headline I have right here that just came in, Bank of America is giving a $520 million credit line to OpenAI in bid for its IPO spot. Okay, so OpenAI just got $500 million of credit from Bank of America to go public, but I don't see any headline here on Iran. Rocket Lab got an upgrade to 250. That's the super bull case. That's not the 1-year target. But I believe you had Morgan Stanley come out and they continue to be super bullish on Rocket Lab. They raised it from 105 to 185. And their Super Bowl case is, 293, not 250. They cited the Iridium acquisition as one of the main reasons for why they're doing this. Here's another real quick piece of news as we have 1 minute before we get into the market open. The past 200 insider transactions across the entire stock market were sells. First time this has ever happened in history. The past 200 transactions in the entire stock market from an insider perspective were sells. You got a lot of the companies we all know about that are on this list. So you do have a bunch of the insiders cashing out. You have put premiums being the lowest they've been in 10 years. And you've got Trump now saying that he wants the ceasefire to be over. You put all that together, you end up getting a red pre-market. But every time we've had some really ugly pieces of news come together, we tend to get a V-shape. I mean, it's happened literally over the past 2 months, I think 5 or 7 times. Will today be different? We are going to find out. Wednesday, July 8th, 9:30 a.m. Thank you, everybody, for being here. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your ass up. Let's get into it. Let's see if we can get a little bit of green coming in from the red on the pre-markets, and we are getting that. Nebius, that's up 1%. Iran up 3.3%. I think the news on Iran is that they're getting added to the Russell 1000. I think that's the news right there. And that could be part of the reason why that stock's up 3%. Nebius up 1.2. CoreWeave, that's up 0.5%. Rocket Lab, that's up 1.9. Penguin Solutions, which had a really good earnings yesterday, that's up about 5.4%. Hit 72 yesterday after hours. Broadcom, 381, $30 billion deal signed with Apple. This one deserves the green. We got to see if it can hold on to it. Micron, 921, still red, but it was at 875 pre-market. So if you were up early and you picked up a little bit of Micron right here at 875, there you go, 922. Now we just got to see if that can hold above 900 or if that's going back down to those low levels. Qualcomm, that's up a little bit. Fuel Cell, they diluted yesterday by 200 million. That's why that stock is down 16%. MicroStrategy, that's down 3%. Bitcoin was trying to make a little bit of a run for it yesterday at 64,000. It's right back down to 61. Again, geopolitical volatility, never the best for Bitcoin as that stock takes a bit of a hit. First Solar, that's down. Enphase, that's down 1.74. T1 Energy, I don't know what the specific news was on it yesterday, but it was down 20%. It's down another 3.65% right here. Theoretically, oil going up is kind of bullish for solar, so you would think maybe it catches a little bit, but you're not seeing that right here. SpaceX, they got into the NASDAQ yesterday. That is up $1. They did get that $800 price target yesterday from Raymond James, and the rest of the street got pretty bullish on it, but that's what you got on SpaceX. Nebius, wow, not a bad little move right there from Nebius back up to 200. Even ARM, dude, ARM was at almost 285 pre-market. Look at that, 304. They might not be up a lot from the 7 a.m. time slot, but from the 5 a.m. time slot, they were doing a pretty big reversal from yesterday. Nebius right there. CoreWeave should be up. CoreWeave is also up. Iran 4103. Peng again up 7.5%. Lumentum, your photonics play is getting a little bit of love. AAOI was 108 in the pre-market. That's 115, still down from 230, but getting a bit of a bounce from the pre-market low. Snapchat, that's down about 1%. Your hyperscalers, are we green? Meta is red. Even after the Meta image model news, the market does not care. NVIDIA is green. NVIDIA got up to 198.50 yesterday before it fell, so 197.46. You got NVIDIA green. AMD is almost green at 514. Palantir got hit below 130 today. It is still below 130. This was at almost 140 yesterday. So software taking a bit of a breather. ServiceNow also getting hit, down about 3.4%. Adobe, that's down 1%. Are we getting a SaaS to semis rotation again? I think we might. Look at that. All the SaaS names, they're red. The only ones that are up are CrowdStrike and Mongo, and they're up by like 15 cents. So those look ready to go red. All the semis are green except Intel. AMD is very close, and then Micron's also very close. All right, yesterday software was down, up, semis were red. Today you are seeing potentially what feels like the exact opposite right here. Microsoft, are we green? Microsoft is red. So when the semis go up, the hyperscalers, the fintech names, and the software names also go down, which is unfortunately what we're seeing right here. Google is red by a little bit. It's barely green compared to yesterday's bloodbath. That is very fair. That is very fair. It's really not that green at all compared to yesterday's bloodbath, but at least it's not getting hit even worse than yesterday. Nebius 201, CoreWeave 84. CoreWeave was $78 yesterday. SpaceX 151, ARM at 301. Micron, wow, there you go. Flips green, 940. Flips green. So this is the market, I think, saying we don't believe the ceasefire is over. And I also think this is the market saying enough is enough in terms of this drawdown for the semis. The CapEx story is not over. This could also be the market kind of just dead cat bouncing into the open. It's only been 4 minutes, so it'll take another hour to see exactly if that's fair. But maybe enough is enough. These semi names, many of these names, Amcor was almost $100. Got pushed down to 62 yesterday. I know it's only at 66 right here, but I mean, does a rebound back to at least 75 make somewhat sense? Rocket Lab, that's at 86. That's getting some love. Western Digital, that is up 4%. What was the all-time high on this? All-time high on this was 800. Wow. Okay, 800 down to the low on this was 474. No, the low on this was, around 480. So now we're back up to 557. SanDisk got hit below 1,500 yesterday. That's at 1,678. So a nice $200 rebound on Mr. Sandus. Grab is trying to go for 4, about 2 cents away. We actually touched it. Let's see if we can get above 4 and actually get a close above 4, which would be very bullish for Grab. Microsoft right there, 382, Palantir, 128.39, Palantir getting down 5%. It is hilarious that the software names once again go red as the semi names go green. Broadcom's up 2.5%. Meta, which technically is in that software bucket with the hyperscalers, they are going red. AMD goes green. NVIDIA goes green. ARM goes green. CoreWeave and Nebius go green. Wolf probably should be up. Is Wolf up? Wolf is up 9.8%. That is green. That is green. Blue Origin is raising $10 billion at $130 billion valuation. That is another reason I think Rocket Lab is up right now, outside of the upgrade from Morgan Stanley. If Blue Origin gets $130 billion valuation, then the overall space sentiment, I think, gets the market a little bit more excited. ASTS right there, that's up 3.9%. Lunar and Redwire probably are up as well. Lunar, that's up 2.6. Redwire, that is up 5. So that could be a sort of macro catalyst for the space names in general. But software, once again, goes red. Wow. They're really taking Palantir down here. Really taking the software names down as we go back to selling them off. It's kind of funny, man. I wonder when the market gets to a point where everything can go up or everything can go down, because we just haven't had that for what seems like a full year now. Say to 2140, as that's down 2%. And maybe this is such a violent and volatile market filled with so many different corresponding perspectives from individual investors, hedge funds, institutions, et cetera, that we can't have a market that goes up and down together. There have to be these segments that are running in parallel with each other. The sort of obvious reason is because, a lot of people go short semis, long software, or long semis, short software to kind of hedge their bets. And it feels like that narrative has just not died out and is not dying out anytime soon. Micron just went red, but barely down on the day, $3. So the shorts from this morning are not being rewarded as these stocks are getting a reversal. Where's KLAC? This has had a massive run over the past couple of days. That's up 0.5%. Rocket Lab still at 85.45. Semis, Intel's the only one I think that's getting hit because they supposedly lost the Apple contract. I don't think they actually lost it, but they haven't announced it in the way that Broadcom announced it this morning. So it feels like the market's wondering if they're actually going to get that deal. But Intel down from 140 to 108, Broadcom 378, ASML. This was at 1900. Now it's at 1700, but it bottomed closer a couple days ago to 1650. So it's nice to see that get a rebound. And then on semiconductor, that one is also flat. As of now, the CapEx is going to semis, not software, which, yeah, and once again, that continues to be the argument for why it's hard to get too bearish. Like, the way to get really bearish while still maintaining the argument that the CapEx is going to go to the semis is that the life cycle for the semiconductor names to be beneficiaries of CapEx has peaked, meaning the earnings haven't peaked, but the rate of growth for how much more incremental revenue they could get from the hyperscalers has peaked. So you could see the earnings go up, but you could see the growth rate of the overall beneficiary expenditures go down. And if that's the case, then the market would price it in a year before it happens, which I guess is somewhat of a way you could go bearish. But then that begs the question, do you think kind of the AI sentiment around new products and innovations have peaked? Agents have literally come out in the past year. Right? Robots aren't even out yet. So if you assume the optimistic version of what Jensen's been saying, which is that there's going to be so many more things that we haven't even thought of, which are going to need more memory, more compute, more infrastructure, more energy, et cetera, then you kind of don't get that bearish on it. Marvell right there, 231.80 as that flips. Marvell is now at the price. It is $5 above the price. It was at 225 the night that Jensen said they're a $1 trillion company. So it is $7 above that price, which means you're basically getting the Jensen pump for free now if you think the Jensen pump comes back. But it ran up almost at 340 based on those Jensen comments. Alibaba, that is up 8% as well. Do you think we're in stagflation? Well, if oil actually spikes based on restarting the war, then theoretically it's possible, and I think the Fed is afraid of that, but I don't know. I don't think Trump is. What did Trump just say? We may take over Karg Island. We may put the blockade back. We would hate to strike the desalination plants, but we may have to. And then Hegseth said, tonight we'll hit deeper if we need to in Iran. NATO nations need to send minesweepers. Okay. There's the mention of Karg Island. Last time he said that, he tacoed within a day. You guys remember S&P was 727, went all the way up to 740 the same day when he said on Truth Social, we will not be bombing Karg Island. After in the morning, he went on Fox News and said, we're going to take over the entire island. So if he's bringing that up again, you have to ask yourself, or I guess the market has to ask itself, how seriously do we think he's really going to go for this? Or is this just another attempt for him to negotiate? PayPal, that's down 1.6%. SoFi, that's down 1%. SPY, still down 0.5%, not really getting too much recovery. ARK, down 1%. Meta, 604, that's down 1.8% as well. Would semis go up on a war? You know, the semis have gone up throughout the war ever since April. So, like, if the semis fully flip green and we get back to a war, even though theoretically they should go down, I mean, for the past 2 months, they've only gone up, even when we had bad news. So maybe they keep going. Micron, 950. All right, Micron now getting a more healthier breakout. If Micron starts to go, everything should follow it. Qualcomm, ARM, SMH up 1%. You would imagine this stuff potentially changes right here. T1 Energy, that's up 1%. And then SpaceX, that's up 1.65 as well. Wow. This is Axios. OpenAI has agreed to acquire Northslope, its second acquisition aimed at enterprise AI deployment. Northslope, for those that don't know, is a consulting firm. And, oh, this is incredible. Wow. So Northslope is a consulting firm that is a Palantir-rooted consulting firm. The founder of it, Bill Ward, I interviewed him. He's an X4 deployed engineer at Palantir. He just sold his consulting firm to OpenAI. The deal expands its team of 4 deployed engineers and underscores a shift from model building to helping customers actually implement AI. Oh, that's incredible. Like that firm is literally dedicated to just helping you deploy Palantir inside your enterprise. You know, there's all these like AWS consulting firms, GCP consulting firms. I ran, by the way, up 6%. Northslope is specifically a Palantir consulting firm. If anything, it proves Palantir's business model around having 4 deployed engineers. If OpenAI is buying the entire firm to figure out how to actually implement software inside of an enterprise, because that's really where the value is coming from. But it looks like they're going to need more help trying to implement that. ARM, that's at 305. That's green. SMH flipping green. Broadcom 380. Peng, great earnings last night, 71.24. They're being rewarded right here, up 13.7%. Qualcomm 184 as that continues to go green. And then Corning 186.40. Is this good for Palantir? Well, I don't think it really has an effect on Palantir, but more so it's proving that it's good for Palantir in the sense that OpenAI having to acquire this company to be able to actually implement their models inside of an enterprise is proving Karp's point. The model companies have no idea how to actually deliver value to an enterprise. All they know how to do is sell tokens. Maybe OpenAI will figure out how to actually deliver enterprise value and use cases that can make them a transformative tool outside of just selling tokens to a hospital or a logistics company, et cetera. But it's a hard thing to do, right? It's not easy. And so the fact that they're acquiring these companies just proves that they need help, because selling tokens is not enough to win in the enterprise. And consumers don't have money to pay for models. Like advertising is not the best business model to justify a $1 trillion valuation on this, especially because they're not at the scale of Google and Meta yet. So they really do need to win in the enterprise to get things to change. Meta continues to go red, which is hilarious here as the semis spike up. So software and hyperscalers, once again, getting hit. Keel, that's up 3% as the semis go higher. SanDisk, that's up now 4% as that continues to go green. The 10-year, are we up on the 10-year? We were up at 4.5 yesterday. We were at 4.6. Okay, so those oil comments by Trump. 10-year doesn't love that. as that one continues to go green. I don't think we have any macro data today. We do have a 10-year auction later in the day. Oh, we do have the Fed minutes. So that's going to be important. And that's at 2 p.m. So be prepared if those minutes potentially move the market in any way based on what Kevin Warsh would say. Rock Lab right there, that's up 1.6% at 84. Rocket got hit. RKT, Rocket Companies, that is down 4%. Yeah, anything super sensitive to interest rates. Zillow probably is red. Zillow is red. And SoFi, obviously, sensitive to interest rates. SoFi down 1.5% as well. Iranian Supreme Leader's advisor says U.S. moves will push the region towards the fire. Push the region toward the fire. Okay. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to show you guys. So this was in the morning. This came out from the Iranian Foreign Ministry. It was a declaration of a response to what Trump said. So you can see it right there. The translation is, between the attacks, Washington revoking Iran's oil export waiver, and the Hormuz standoff, it says the agreement's core terms are now ineffective and the U.S. carries full responsibility for whatever comes next. It also puts the Gulf neighbors on notice, hosting U.S. forces that attack Iran, and you're complicit, vowing to hit the source and origin of any aggression. Again, it's rhetoric from the IRGC that they've been putting out for a while. The problem is they have executed on some of that rhetoric in terms of taking down the Middle Eastern allies that we rely on with them, with the multiple attacks they've had on a variety of them. So I think that's also part of the leverage that Iran has. If we actually go to war with them, they're just taking down all the other countries that supply a lot of oil, which inevitably, impacts oil prices. Micron right there, 955. Semis don't care. It's kind of what we've seen throughout June, right? Or more importantly, throughout May. Like, even with really ugly headlines, look at ARM up almost 6% right there. The semis do not care. In fact, I think they kind of like the Middle Eastern volatility. If this continues, Kospi is going to reverse tomorrow. The Qs just went green. The Qs just almost went green, very close. They're like 30 cents away. Is Hoodie green? Hoodie is very close to going green as well. Very close of almost getting there. XLE Energy is up today. VG is up today. VG back to 12. Okay, a little bit of a red candle on Micron. So we saw this yesterday at around, I think it was 11 a.m. Micron went from 898 to 930, and then that was the top for the next 2 hours, then got to 940, then that was the official top for the day. So usually it's marked by these like aggressive $10, $15 moves to the downside. And you have like an $8 move right now, 956 to 948, but we got to see if that continues down. ARM right there, 309.50, and then the rest of the names just kind of move with Micron, to be honest. When they go up or down. SpaceX, are we green? We are below 150, 149.30. Is anyone buying the SpaceX dip? 230 to 147? Anyone selling calls, selling puts on it? You do have a lot of the float opening up over the next 7 months, but you also have NASDAQ inclusion. All of space is not down, though, so this is SpaceX specific, which is what you're seeing. Dell, someone just bought $18.4 million of Dell calls, $500 strike. March 2027 is your expiry. So Dell getting some really bullish option flow in right now. A couple of people saying, yes, been buying them. We'll buying them later. Does anyone even care about SpaceX anymore? SpaceX did occupy a lot of the market's attention for like a week. And then I think people just kind of forgot about it. Nebius right there, 199, as that falls from 206, but it got there pretty quickly. Is the semi pump fading? Was it that quick? That was 20 minutes? Micron now, there you go. That's a almost $12 candle down. I mean, if it was that quick, then that would be much quicker than yesterday. We would need software to get a little bit of a pump right here to prove that the pump faded. This is so untradeable. Yeah, I would imagine it's hard before you even develop a trend to figure out what trend to ride, especially within the opening minutes of the day. Iran Supreme Leader Advisor says the verbal acknowledgement of the cancellation of the Memorandum of Understanding falls on the shoulders of the U.S. president. The resistance axis will not remain silent in the face of adventures, and our finger is on the trigger. Why do they... You will push us towards the fire. Our finger is on the trigger. Like, are these guys poets or something, dude? Like, goodness gracious, dude. Our finger is on the trigger. 106 on service now. Oklo below 50. As oil continues to spike up 73.77. Do you think this is a liquidity trap for the SK Hynix IPO? I am really confused on if that IPO is going to get retail excited. Because on one, like put it, is anyone buying the SK Hynix IPO? Because it's going to trade with Micron and SanDisk. Like, I don't think retail is doing that much research into like, oh, SK Hynix has all these different nuances to their business. Like, it's a memory stock. There's differences between how old the memory stocks trade, but they're all up or they're all down. So I think if it gets interest from retail, it's going to be because like people want a new stock to play with. But I don't think it's that fundamentally different from the Micron trade or the SanDisk trade. So the institutional investors are going to line up to buy it. The rumor is that Situational Awareness Leopold Fund is going to put in about $7 billion. And obviously that's bullish because they think the memory trade will go further. But I wonder how much retail, like Micron's in the top 5 traded stocks every single day for options contracts. Like, will that happen to SK Hynix? Like, will people actually care that much? MU now almost back up to 950. Because if retail doesn't care about it, then I don't know. But it also feels like it's kind of a crappy time for them to IPO, just given how sentiment has shifted on the semis. Then again, we've got, what, a couple of days until the IPO? There, a few days is a long amount of time. Trump could say anything. Semis could rocket up. Micron could get back to 1,000, and then it could be a perfect time for them to IPO. They're 2x cheaper than MU. Can someone give me the forward PE on SK Hynix right now? MU's forward PE, let me look that up, is, let's get the exact number. Their forward PE is, for 2027, I have 6.2. So are we saying SK Hynix is at like 3 if it's that much cheaper? Because if it's around the same range, I mean, I don't know. Like, do U.S. investors get super excited about that? ASTS, that's up 1.8% as well. Forward PE of 6.3. Okay, that seems very similar. And the market cap's still at $1 trillion, right? Yeah. SK Hynix is at, Micron's at $952 billion. SK Hynix is at $976 billion. Sorry, Micron's at $1.07 trillion. SK Hynix at $976 billion. So it's only 40, 50 billion away from Micron. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how many people will be super excited for it. DRAM already has had exposure to SK Hynix for a while. So that ETF has allowed people to get some exposure. ARM at 307, SoFi 1740. Palantir, are we recovering a little bit? We are not. We are very close to the lows of the day at 126.77. Netflix trying to get a little bit of a move, but that's down 1%. NVIDIA actually going for it, 197.60, almost 198. Reddit losing 205. Broadcom, really good move, and it's at least nice to see that the market's rewarding Broadcom for a big Apple partnership. SMCI is up a little bit. All right, so again, Dell up a nice 4%. They did get an upgrade to 500 today, but once again, the semis in control and everything else takes a hit if the semis are in control. Microsoft, Adobe, ServiceNow, Google, Amazon, Meta. Meta's getting ready to go below 600. Amazon, red. It's the same story, just a different day of where the semi stocks force the rest of the market to go. NVIDIA touched 200 earlier. Yeah, even yesterday, dude. NVIDIA, it was 199.86. Oh, wow. So there was a red candle at 948 on NVIDIA. I didn't even see that. So it was 14 cents away from 200. Then it took that. That's the same time that Micron took the $12 hit. And that's why it's going down. Our politicians just disclosed a bunch of stocks that they bought. So Representative April Delaney bought ENTG. This has actually been a big winner in the semi space, Integris, and bought Hubble, HUBB. Representative Josh Gottemeyer sold Baba Nintendo, and he didn't buy anything. And then Maria Salzer, she bought Salesforce. She bought Voyager Tech, space name, interesting. And she bought Brookfield Renewables. She sold UNH. Okay, nothing too crazy right there. And none of that really heavily focused on tech. When did they buy these stocks? Within the last 45 days. So it has to be disclosed within 45 days. It's basically from June 12th to July 1st is when they either bought or sold any of these names. Salesforce right here, 164. This stock also has been stuck for the past few weeks. At least ServiceNow got a rebound from 89 to 110. Now at 105. So at least this one, made a bit bigger of a move. Mate, why can't I see your channel in India? I don't know. A couple people have messaged that they can't see the channel in India. I have no idea why. I don't think there's something wrong with the channel in India, but I should probably reach out to someone at YouTube to talk about that, because there's been a few people saying they have to search for it because it doesn't pop up. So I don't know. Maybe I said something mean about India and they're not showing it. Peng up 17. Okay, so this one, really good earnings. Look at that, 17% right here. This one actually dipped overnight. So the overnight buys on this are being rewarded, as they also had a decent earnings. Because India banned gay influencers. Dude, that is crazy. That's actually crazy. Palantir 127.40 as this one tries to get a breakout. Trying to see if we can get some more updates on what Trump said about Iran. Apparently he's about to go live again. This is like his third conference today. There's going to be a NATO press conference that he's going to do again. We'll see if we get any quotes from that. If not, the market's going to have to grapple with, essentially what he said, which is that the ceasefire is over. Again, I don't think the ceasefire is over, because if the ceasefire is over, then we have a lot of issues. And so you would imagine that he's saying it to say it, but it's not really true. This is the clip of him saying we're going to take over Karg Island about 30 minutes ago.
Well, first of all, we took out additional, they were trying to rebuild their radar, and they had about 60% built. Now they have to start all over again. Look, we're not attacking at the highest level. The highest level of the bridges, which we can knock down. I would say in one day we knocked down every single bridge in Iran. There's not a thing they can do about it. Their electric manufacturing facilities, right? Their electric plants where they make their electricity there. We will, if we have to, we'll take them out. I don't want to do that, but if we have to, we'll take them out. They have desalinization plants. We'll take them out if we have to. I hate to do that. That's probably the one I would like not to do least. We attacked Karg Island last night. We knocked out a piece. I said, don't touch the oil, because maybe we'll take over Karg Island. We may take over Karg Island. There's not a thing they can do about it. But I said, don't hit the pipes. Just hit everything else. And they hit it. They may hit it again tonight. So, as for your question, normally I'm not that way, but they really deserve it, because they're saying they want to make a deal, but they don't. They asked for a timeout. They wanted to go to the funeral of Khomeini. And I said, give it to them. And they start shooting missiles. I mean, it was the craziest thing. Now, we did kill him. So I guess you have to look at it that way. But the funeral took place, and they wanted to have a period of time. And they also asked that we not kill them. And we said, we're not going to kill you. They were worried we'd kill them during the funeral. I mean, if you can believe it, what a crazy. Did you ever think I'd be doing this for a living, Marco? Did anybody ever think I'm doing, maybe Pete, but this wasn't supposed to be for me. Pete loved this stuff from day one. But they said to us, please don't kill us during the funeral. I said, I won't. And we didn't do anything. In fact, we made it safe for them, actually. And what happens? They try and knock out two ships, a Saudi and I guess Kuwait, right? Kuwaiti? Oh, no, Qatari. In addition, really three.
Yes, sir.
So you had three of them. And
All right. That was Trump explaining that he's going to try to take over Karg Island. Again, the semis don't really care. The software names do. Look at Nebius, 204. Dell, almost 440. SpaceX even getting a little bit of a bid. NVIDIA trying to get back up. I think the market's just ignoring Trump's comments like they have been over the past couple of months as they continue to believe that this crisis is not going to last forever. ARM up 3%. ARM was at 280 in the morning, 310. The Q's at 708, and then Robinhood at 112. Iran. So did we find out the Iran news? Is it Russell 1000 inclusion? I think that's it. I don't think there's a deal or anything like fundamental. But Iran right there up 6.48% as that continues to go green. Yeah, I mean, this is classic ignoring what Trump says to go higher. I mean, again, this is why this market, like anyone who tried to short on Trump saying he thinks the ceasefire is over, like you can't do that. Like whenever he gets super bearish or says something super provocative, it is like a short-term jolt of red, but almost every single time, I mean, literally every single time this year, the market just moves on from it, either because Trump says something about it or the market just like, he's not actually going to be that crazy. And he never ends up being, that crazy where he goes all the way. Now we're front running it this time because he hasn't officially changed his mind, but probably front running it for a good reason. Micron right there, 950. SoFi does trust what Trump's going to say. The problem with SoFi again is that any hint of oil going up means rate hikes go up, which is bad for SoFi. So I think SoFi is, not even reacting to Trump; it's just reacting to Fed probabilities of a cut, which oil will immediately impact. So it needs to see more proof that that's not the case. Wow, Tesla below 394. Can someone explain to me the Tesla drama from yesterday? There's like some drama in the Tesla community of people that thought something big was going to happen yesterday, and then it didn't happen. Like apparently someone said there's going to be some big Tesla news, and it didn't happen, and a lot of people got mad that that person said there was a bunch of news that was going to happen. I have not looked into it, but your Tesla community is definitely pissed for some reason. Stock was at 420 yesterday, and now it's down. Rumor was big news coming out, but what was the big news? Like, what do you mean by big news? Like Optimus news, energy news, Cybercab news, robotaxi news? It was all made up. We don't know, bro. We were busy hating on Messi. Dude, that game was crazy. That was crazy. He was 20 minutes away from being done with his World Cup career, and he came back. I mean, that was incredible. I'm not even a big soccer guy, but just watching that was unbelievable. So shout out to Messi, dude. Even Tom Brady came out and said, I think that was better than the comeback that I had against the Falcons in 2017. Like that. Also, isn't the World Cup more exciting with Messi? Like if Messi and Ronaldo were out in the round of 16, I feel like it would not be as exciting to see who ends up winning this. Walmart right there, that's up 1% as well as that continues to go green. Everyone's saying it's rigged. I found out after posting about Messi yesterday that as much as I think people like him, I think there's more people that don't like the guy and that really think that FIFA has a conspiracy to just make him win everything. I did not know there was this much hate towards Matt. And it's not just people that like hate him because he's so good and he beats their team. It's like people that genuinely feel like he's a plant from FIFA to just like be the thing that they paint all over the media and stuff and like pose him as the winner. I didn't know people felt that way. It's a hell of a script if you're 20 minutes away from being eliminated. If it really was scripted, they had 20 minutes to change the script. And boy, did they change it. Microsoft right there, 383, as that one also goes red. Okay, Adobe's down. We have wholesale inventory prices. Let's take a look at that. See if that has any impact on the market either.
It's up 0.3, and it now moves into a much weaker mode, only up 0.1. Second weakest of the year outside of January, where it was a minus 0.3. And this is notable. We've seen a real slowdown in the growth of inventories. What we see is 1.5 in March, 0.7 in April, and obviously this up 0.1 in May. That deceleration most likely will prove to be a bit of a subtraction ultimately when we receive Q2 GDP. On the sales side, this is a fresh number, 3.4%. That is 4 times more than we were expecting. And in the rearview mirror, our last look of 2% becomes 2.2. 3.4 is the best sales number going all the way back to Jan of 22. And indeed, it is good news. And remember, we see the trade deficit going up. We see these inventory numbers moving down. So this is good to see sales picking up, of course, as we potentially see better demand. Also, some of the large durable goods like washing machines are decelerating for more of a less durable type good. And we're
That said, he and other officials have said that negotiations with Iran can continue, but the president this morning casting significant doubt that a diplomatic solution is still possible.
Now, as to whether or not Steve Witkoff, Jared, and JD and everybody working on that will talk, I guess they could talk, but I'm not seeing it with them, with the people. My whole life is deals. I don't see it.
He later said that even if a deal is ultimately struck with Iran, he's not sure that it will stick because he has found the Iranians to be, quote, very dishonorable people. Guys.
So, Megyn, where are we? Are we back to war or are we, I guess everybody, not everybody, but certainly the question is being asked exactly how we can characterize the current situation.
There is so little clarity around this, is what I would say. We are awaiting a presidential news conference, so maybe we get more then. But I'll say reporters asked the president directly, does this mean we're back to full-scale war? And he did not answer that question directly. He continues to say, to me, the ceasefire is over. We'll find out if other officials and if Iran believe that the ceasefire is over. Clearly what we know now is attacks are going to continue being exchanged, though we have seen that before. Iran is targeting shipping in the Strait, and that's enough to spook the oil markets, as we've seen so far today. That's enough to, raise questions about whether ships should be going through here. If the ceasefire is over, does that mean negotiations are continuing? If the president doesn't believe a diplomatic solution is possible, what's the reason? Why would they even still be holding talks? Clearly, the president feels backed into a corner here. He feels like he's running out of options. He deeply wants to be on the other side of this war, but doesn't have a way to get there. And it's also striking that all of this is happening while he's at this NATO summit, surrounded by European leaders who also really want to see things back to normal in the Strait of Hormuz. He's not exactly rallying them all to his side. And instead, the president's sort of standing alone here, but saying that, he thinks they're going to need to return to at least more attacks in Iran, if not full-scale war.
Yeah, the timing of it all is truly remarkable. Megyn, thank you so much. Megyn Casella for us. Joining us to talk about the market reaction is Julian Emanuel, Chief Equity and Quantitative Strategist at Evercore. So, Julian, obviously the market's acting with a risk-off posture today. Equity is down, yields up, oil up. Do you feel like the risk premium of the war resuming is currently being reflected, or is this what you would expect from a market that, based on those comments from President Trump, appears to be that the ceasefire is over?
Well, actually, if you think about the degree of those comments, and you think about the fact that oil moving $4 at 70 from 70 to 74 is a lot more significant than moving, say, from 100 to 104, as we were in March and April. The rest of the asset market is relatively calm right now. And frankly, I think part of that is because essentially, since Warsh took over as Fed chair, we have been accepting and more understanding of a bit more volatility. Look, we don't know how this is going to play out. It seems that the best interest would be to find a way to get a negotiation to stick despite the rhetoric. But obviously, there's a long way from here to there. However, the markets continue to focus on the idea that longer term, you've got, macro disruptions, but again, longer term, you've got earnings strength.
What do you mean by that? Since Warsh took over, we've been more accepting of volatility in oil in particular, and what that means for the follow through to inflation?
In everything. It's well known, really going back to actually Paul Volcker in the late 1970s, that when a new Fed chair takes over, whether it's the crash of 1987 with Greenspan or again Volcker and others, there tends to be a higher period of volatility really amongst all assets. And it was likely to happen anyway, given the historic run-up that we had in semiconductor shares. When things go up, 100, 200, 3%, 300% in a matter of months, a 20 or 30% pullback is actually healthy in the longer term. And so we're in a period of more volatility as we sort through both the micro of what's going to be a great earnings season and obviously the macro that's shifted in the last 48 hours.
There is some discussion on these momentum baskets that are unwinding faster than history. Is that right?
They're unwinding pretty quickly. But again, it goes back to it's proportional. We made a sort of an offhanded remark near the lows back in March that one of our favorite semiconductor names, which was in the 300th at the time, that the cycle wouldn't end until that stock got above 1,000. Well, the stock was well above 1,000 and moving back. But again, this is part, and particularly if you're a tech-focused investor, you understand this volatility. It's been profitable for 40 years. We continue to think it's going to be profitable. It's just that the macro backdrop is making this kind of volatility go elsewhere. And frankly, Carl, to us, there's likely an opportunity evolving in the underloved, underowned, and shorted in a lot of cases, bigger cap technology names that aren't specifically the chip names who are going to report great earnings.
You prefer that to old economy, travel, retail, consumer, you name it?
So we actually think there's a place for both. I think, and again, part of what's been disquieting for the last few weeks is that if you're an investor, you have to understand the dominance of the AI theme. It is literally in every asset. It's everywhere. Bond yields, if we had a risk-off market, bond yields probably wouldn't decline as much as they might normally because we're worried about AI-driven inflation. So within that context, you're looking for some form of portfolio diversification. And this is the kind of morning that tells you, whether it's energy or consumer staples or what have you, you want a little bit of that in your portfolio because it helps you sleep better at night.
So in terms of the near-term market catalysts, you've got this SK Hynix dual listing coming out later this week. You've got earnings season starting next week. What are you paying most attention to, especially as you're thinking about some of the portfolio rebalancing opportunities that may lie ahead?
So we do think earnings season is very, very important. And as we've seen through the last few earnings seasons, and really the April season was the prime example where the positioning in aggregate was as bearish as we've seen it in a number of years, and that's why the market ripped, is how stocks react where there's both overextended positioning to the upside and to the downside. And again, that's why we go back to some of these beaten up large cap tech names, very heavily shorted. The semis, not so much, which is why a hesitant reaction after such a rise is normal.
All right, we'll see.
Okay, the semis still continuing to struggle here. Struggle relative to their performance over the past week, but relatively green here today. NVIDIA tried to break 200, right back down to 197. I think the core argument that Evercore is making, along with what every analyst is saying, Broadcom, the one semi that's just really getting some love on this Apple deal, that's up 5% here, up $17, is that the CapEx cycle is not slowing down. And that is why this becomes an opportunity. Every time you get scared, you remember that the CapEx has to be spent. As simple as it is, it really has been what's worked for the majority of the year, is remembering that CapEx isn't slowing down. I mean, for this to be a real blow up, like a real blow up of the entire market, you would need substantial evidence that CapEx is slowing down, or you would need substantial evidence that the hyperscalers aren't seeing the ROI on CapEx, even if they continue to spend it, which marks the peak to the level of growth in CapEx. And just, there's no evidence about that. So Dell flipped completely red. What happened there? That was at 450, now down to 416. That was a nasty red candle. But without that type of evidence, it's hard to get, as structurally bearish as what the market could be implying right here. Again, Broadcom, $30 billion deal with Apple, and that is why that stock is getting some love. There were rumors about that deal yesterday, but the confirmation of the deal happened earlier this morning. And as a result of that confirmation, I think that's why you're seeing this stock get the budge. Here was Mark Gurman yesterday explaining why this deal was good for Broadcom.
What I'm telling you is that this is specifically for a new server chip that Apple is developing. They're using some Broadcom technology. This is called ASIC chips. An ASIC chip silicon is single purpose silicon, right? You're not going to need that for anything really other than a singular functionality, which is processing for AI. And so they're going to be rolling out this chip as early as next year. It's called Baltra within Apple. It's their first server specific chip. Right now, for the Apple Intelligence servers, they use M2 processors. Those were made for Macs. This is going to be a version of the M5 Ultra, which is going to be their most powerful chip ever. But this is going to have 4x that performance on the GPU and on the CPU side. This is going to have some Broadcom technology in there. What I'm telling you is that this is specifically...
Again, that was supposed to be Intel, but it ended up happening to be with Broadcom. And I think that's why you're seeing how the market is, framing this narrative around AVGO up 4.5% right there. ServiceNow, that's down 3.8%. Salesforce down 2.7 right there. Is Micron still getting some love? MU 944 right here, as that continues to try to flip green. That 10-year auction today at 2:30, along with the Fed minutes, going to be important. And we'll see how the market thinks from there. Oh, we got Adam Jonas talking about SpaceX. Okay, let's get Morgan Stanley's projections on this. Again, you had pretty much the entire street. There was one sell side firm that came out yesterday with a 135 target. The other 19 were bullish on SpaceX. So let's see how they're kind of making sense of the bull case for SpaceX.
Real estate for low Earth orbit, then opened up the opportunity to do satellite constellations, low Earth orbit, broadband in space. That's the cash flow machine. So that's a 50% margin business. By itself generates quite a bit of cash. Then that business, and that's modeled through subscribers and ARPU. Broadband subscribers, enterprise subscribers, mobile subscribers. So it's just unit times price, POPs times ARPU. And then that opens up the optionality to the third thing, which didn't really exist until recently, which is their AI business. And their AI business is, most of it now is more of we have the Neo Cloud model, which is like a revenue per watt type model, where they've signed some pretty chunky, pretty profitable deals recently. But then I think, David, if I look at you, I know you've interviewed Elon over the years.
Yeah.
Do you think Elon's just is building compute on Earth and then eventually in orbit? Is the goal just to do that for other people's AI, or would SpaceX maybe have some broader ambitions to do something?
I would assume,
a little more,
given they cite a total addressable market for enterprise AI alone of some $22.6 trillion or something along those lines. I'm trying to remember that it would have to be their own, Adam.
High ambitions, a lot of investment needed, maybe close to $700 billion of external funding, debt funding that we've modeled. And they won't be able to raise that unless things are working. So it'll be for folks that are used to Tesla, it's gonna be a volatile ride. And it's up to investors to decide whether the juice is worth the squeeze.
So then what's the bigger risk for SpaceX? Is it financing, if you say $700 billion that they need to raise, I think you model that as like $84 billion of outside capital annually for years.
Yes.
And it won't be cash flow positive for a decade. So is that the bigger risk, just the financing component, or is it the engineering and meeting the milestones? And
there's lots of risks here. Space is hard. You saw what can happen on a launch pad with a competitor a few weeks ago. Anomalies happen all the time. They've happened to SpaceX. They will continue to happen to SpaceX. I would say to your audience, there will very likely over some period of time, a year or so, a couple of years, where there will be an anomaly, an explosion, or something like this, and the stock will be down significantly on the day. And you on your program will discuss what do we do now. So that's part of it. Just the launching is itself and orbital insertion and these types of things requires. I'm tempted to say it's not rocket science, but it actually is.
We saw that happen with ASTS with the Blue Origin launch a month ago as well. I mean, that stock fell from 110 to 65. So theoretically, those are the risks that have to be baked in for something like a SpaceX. But again, even with those risks baked in, the potential of what they could accomplish is greater than most stocks that are out there. It's just the multiple you're paying for that potential. How much is that truly worth? BlackBerry right there, 1098. That's down about 1%. BlackBerry had a really good earnings last week. I thought the earnings were pretty strong. Stock here is at $6.4 billion. This thing got up to 24, 25 back in 2021 before falling to 2. It's made a really nice move since those $2 lows, but it's basically been stuck at 2 for the past couple of years here. 2 to 3 or 2 to 5. And now you've seen a breakout. Nebius, 209 maybe. 2855, trying to get there. And then DRAM getting a little bit bigger of a move. Let's see if Nebius, CoreWeave, Iran, they can all... Look at that, CoreWeave 88. This was at 78 in the pre-market, so that one's getting a boost. Nebius was at 186 in the pre-market. That one's getting a move. Mr. Meta, 605. That's a little something after touching 600. Nokia, the Wall Street Journal came out with a really bullish article on Nokia. They did this with BlackBerry a couple of weeks ago. And they did like a full feature piece on Nokia. The problem with Nokia is, again, 2 issues. Number one, it's up a lot this year, which is why, asking for multiple dollars of gains after it's up 100% is not the easiest. But number 2 is the sentiment around a Nokia or a BlackBerry is intrinsically tied to the AI trade, because they're not the biggest winners of the AI trade. Now, they have earnings potential that can make them massive winners, but if Micron takes a 20% hit, Nokia, BlackBerry, Samsung, all these other companies, they're going to get hit as well. And so I think it's just been collateral damage with the rest of the semis. Dell trying to flip green after losing $30 in the past 20 minutes. But that one continues to stay red right here. Yeah, that guy did not know how to button his shirt. I think he needs some advice on how to properly button a shirt, because, I mean, dude, there were no buttons from what I could see. Salesforce down about 2.5. Integris, that one's flat. Satellogic as well. All right, so some of the space names, I guess, getting a little bit of a rally with the NASDAQ inclusion of SpaceX. Rocket Lab right there, 84.72. He said it with his chest. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened there. Trump on Syria. We have released sanctions from the country. Syria has become very stable. Trump announces we have officially released sanctions on Syria. Okay, I don't know where he's live, if he is live right now, but you just got those new comments about Syria. So he talked about Turkey, talked about Iran, talked about Syria. He's had a very global conversation here today. Obviously talked about Spain and NATO. Someone just bought $23 million of the Broadcom 410 call for December 17th, 2027. So you got a lot of bullish option flow coming into Broadcom and Dell. Broadcom and Dell this morning. Today's not FOMC day, but we do have FOMC minutes. FOMC is going to be July 29th. Oh, I think that's the same day as Robinhood earnings. That's Wednesday. Yeah, I think that's the same day as Hood earnings. Yeah, July 29th. All right, so we got the Fed, we got Hood earnings. But you have the Fed minutes coming out today. Why are you guys making fun of how I say buttons? I do not say it with a D. That's not buttons. Okay, it kind of does sound like I say it. now that you say it, it kind of does sound like I say it with a D. Buttons? Yeah, that's just so weird. Buttons? Oh, it's buttons. It's like the mortgage situation all over again. Who says buttons or mortgage? It's mortgage and buttons. That's how you say it. Benjamin Buttons. I've never seen that movie about Benjamin. I've always wanted to watch that movie. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Okay, now I'm being self-conscious. now I can hear the D myself. Benjamin Button. By the way, shout out to United, dude. They had all the latest releases on the flight. They had the Michael Jackson movie. They had the movie with Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. I didn't watch any of them because my attention span was so bad. Dude, my phone, okay, we had 2 hours left and my phone died. So I plugged it into my laptop because I was like, my laptop is definitely charged. I paid for the Wi-Fi. My laptop died. I didn't know it died. So for 2 hours, I was sitting in agony, just staring at like the flight. Like, you know, you can stare at the flight map on a plane. I was just staring at it, getting closer to New Jersey because I couldn't pay attention to a movie. It was bad, dude. Like, that was the worst part about coming back. I tried to sleep, but I just woken up from sleeping. So 2 hours of literally just staring at a screen, but the screen was just showing this flight go from one place to another. Why didn't you go to sleep? I couldn't. I tried, but I just waking up from sleeping. Like, I was so mad, dude. I was like, damn, like 2 hours of just like nothing. I tried walking around. I tried like, I had to deal with it as we got back home. Man, what's a fair price for CoreWeave? I think that 120 range is pretty reasonable. I mean, CoreWeave's trading at 2 times sales for 2027. And they have a $100 billion backlog. Like, yes, I know they have a lot of debt, but I think the meta news reinforced the NeoCloud thesis. I don't think it took away from what the NeoClouds are doing at all. So I think the upside is there. Now, Nebius, look, I think there's upside to Nebius as well. It's just this thing had a massive, I mean, CoreWeave is up like 5-7% this year. Nebius is up more than 100%. So this one, I think consolidating is just taking a breather. CoreWeave is just collateral damage with all the NeoClouds getting it, although it has the most amount of revenue. So, I mean, I think it will be fine. It's just, once again, the volatility of this is not good. That's definitely a first world problem. It is indeed a first world problem. But it was 2 hours of not having anything to do. Trump, why are we getting Trump quotes? Where is he live right now? Trump says maybe we'll do some things that could increase oil prices. Oh boy. Where is this guy? Oh, there he is. I got him. This is the third conference in 4 hours, folks. Here we go.
There's something wrong with them. But when we did this, we thought oil would go much higher. And it didn't go very high. And now it's coming way down. And you're going to see oil drop very low. Now, maybe we'll do some other things that could lift it a little bit. But I don't think it's going to lift it a lot at all. I think oil is coming down. There's tremendous amounts of oil. Scott, what would you say about that?
Yes. So record production under President Trump in his first term. Now in his second term, the U.S. is an energy superpower. It's why we weathered the conflict better than anyone else. And there just this weekend, Bloomberg wrote that there is an oil glut out there. And we think that safe, secure American oil maybe even should trade at a premium to the rest of the world.
So we have, if you add it up, you take Saudi Arabia and take Russia, 2 big oil producers. We do more than twice as much. We do more than, so think of it, Saudi Arabia, Russia put together, we do more oil, and that's not including Venezuela. It's pretty amazing. And this all happened during my term. We started it as first term. Biden blew it because he had no idea what he was doing. But we are producing more oil right now than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined by almost double. Okay, any other questions? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
You said that dealing with the Iranians is a waste of time. How do you plan to get the nuclear material and the nuclear assurances that you want?
Well, we've already got the nuclear material because it's so far underground, nobody's going to be able to get it except us because we have the equipment that can get it. But I call it the nuclear test. The nuclear material is so far down underneath the mountain, and now that's been determined, that it would take massive machinery that we have that no other country has.
Mr. President, so you have no plans to go in, boots on the ground?
Why would I go in now? I go in when they're completely either eliminated or whatever happened, or an agreement's made.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if you cut off trade with Spain, does that mean that you're going to have to renegotiate a trade agreement with the EU?
With who?
With the EU, any past trade agreements you already have?
We're going to see what happens with the EU. You know, they've treated us very badly for years, and they took advantages. Look, we're very close to those countries, right? And to everybody in the EU. The problem is they took advantage of the United States for years. It's like him. They took advantage of Syria. He's bringing it back. And I'm bringing the United States back. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. We have the biggest investment. 19.2 trillion is being invested right now in the United States. 3 trillion was the record. Under Biden and under the past administration, they had less than $1 trillion for 4 years. We have 19.2 trillion in 12 months. Think of that. We have the largest amount of money being invested in a country in history. Pretty amazing. 19.2 trillion with a T. So, and they're building factories all over the country. I think yesterday Toyota announced they're leaving Mexico. And they're coming. I'm not that Mexico's thrilled about it, but they're leaving Mexico and they're coming to the United States to build what will be, I believe, the largest automobile plant either in the world or at least in this country.
Mr.
President, on oil prices
Quick domestic question. You announced on your social a couple days ago that Walmart was cutting the price for ground beef by 15%. How big of a deal is that for American customers this summer?
So Walmart has agreed to cut their prices very substantially because things are going down. We're getting it down. We inherited very high prices. We inherited the highest prices in the history of our country, or 48 years to be exact. But I don't believe that. I think it's in history. So under Biden, they had tremendous inflation. Under the Democrats, we had tremendous inflation, record-setting inflation. And now inflation is way down. Everything is great. We have the prices are coming down, but we inherited, they talk about they use different words to describe it. They had very high prices. The prices are coming down. And when the oil comes, the oil is coming way down. The oil dropped by 50% in the last month. And when that comes down, it brings everything else down. No, it's affordability. And they came up with the word affordability. Like I take over, I'm there for 1 day, and they say affordability. I said, I've been here remember with the eggs, the first day or 2 days later, I have my first news, and they talked about eggs. They said the eggs have gone up 5 times. I've been in office for 1 day. And I said, well, we'll have to do something. In fact, they told me not to order eggs for the Easter egg hunt at the White House. I should use plastic. I said, we're not doing that. And by the time we came, that was a couple of months later, that happened, and we ordered thousands of eggs. And right now, eggs are way down. The prices are way down, and they're coming down further. So they made up a phony word that they used. They said affordability. They're the ones that caused the affordability prices. I did. But I brought it down. And the oil is coming down very big.
Mr. President, Brent crude is up slightly today on the announcement that
we hit them. Anytime we hit them, it goes up a little bit, $2.
Is that what you mean? Is that what you meant when you said that we might see oil prices lift a little in response to?
Bit, $2, very little. It's down from, let's say, $135 down to $69. It's dropping, and everything else drops. As oil goes, so goes everything else. But anytime if we hit Iran, oil goes up a little bit. It's all right.
Mr. President, do you think Israel?
We're de-nuking it. All right. We're de-nuking Iran. They're not going to have a nuclear weapon. All right. One more question.
Sir, do you think Israel should withdraw troops from southern Lebanon?
Well, I talked to Bibi about that. Yeah, I think they're going to. I think they want to. I don't think it's a question of me. I think it's a question they want to. And they're getting along with Lebanon. They're signing deals with Lebanon. First time ever. Marco, talk about that if you like.
Yeah, we have an agreement that, and it calls, that's the goal at the end. Obviously, Israel's concerned about their security. But the president did a great job bringing those two countries together for the first time.
It's a big thing. First time in many years, right? So we have a deal with Israel and Lebanon. And yeah, they'll leave. And I think it's going to work out very well. But we're here for this because Syria has turned around as fast as I've ever seen. Well, actually, I turned the United States around very fast, too. I inherited from a man who was not smart, not a smart person. We inherited from a man where they were running this country so badly with the open borders. I think there were 25 million people allowed into our country, and that includes 11,888 murderers, most of whom murdered more than one person, okay? We got most of them out, or we have them in jail, and we've done a great job. Washington, D.C. now is considered one of the safest cities in the country. If he came to Washington, D.C. a year and a half ago, he'd fear for his life, even though he never feared for his life before, because it was very dangerous. But somehow his territory might have even been a little more dangerous. I joke because, you know, he comes from a rough environment. Would you say that's right, Tom Barrett? It's sort of funny to think. I don't think he'd be too concerned with Washington a year and a half. But we had a very, very unsafe Washington, D.C., and now it's one of the safest cities in the country. We put the military in. We brought this. Washington went from being an unsafe to one of the safest cities, and crime is down 94%. We don't play games. We removed over 5,000 career criminals, many of whom came in through the open.
All right, so not getting anything too different from what Trump said in the first few press conferences that he had today. Corey right there, 87.21, got all the way up to 88. You got Nebius at 211. You're starting to see the neoclouds come back. He said we're going to do something about oil prices, but you know, obviously didn't go as far as saying that we're not going to bomb Iran, which they did say a few hours ago. So once again, the market's trying to figure out how much do they believe that that's actually going to happen. Iran, that's up 6%. NVIDIA trying to get back up to 198. Integris, that's up a little bit. Palantir, some of the software names getting a slight recovery. He mentioned the price of eggs, which have come down, but not sure it's having the biggest impact on inflation right now. ServiceNow 106, that's down 3.65% as well. Crude inventories, we got data coming in, 2.99 million. The forecast was negative 3.7. Actual inventories 1.9. Forecast was negative 1.7. And then distillate inventories 4.98 negative. Forecast was positive 2.48. So obviously we still have some issues when it comes to the supply of oil, and that's, you know, not really helping equity prices right here. NVIDIA now going lower. All right, you're seeing some red candles on the semis. They're fighting to stick with the trend right here, but they already have made a pretty decent move so far on the day. S&P really hasn't gotten hit that bad. I mean, I know it's down 0.7, but it hasn't touched the pre-market lows of 739, which is kind of giving me faith that this 742 range could easily turn to 745 if we have a bigger reversal. You do have a nice red candle right there, but we've respected 740 pretty much throughout the morning. Yeah, volume seems to be a little light as well across a bunch of these names. CoreWeave now losing 87, Rocket Lab 84, Micron 943. Micron was at 955. Broadcom right there at 386. Amid, I think we get a rug pull if we go any higher from here. You know, yesterday again at around 11:15, it was a pretty steep rug pull. So you never know exactly when puts in that short-term top for the day, but obviously it could happen. And then if you went short at around 2 p.m. yesterday, I mean, everything collapsed. Literally everything. You had a macro headline that just took everything down. Even the software names. Palantir went from 138 down to 134. And you had most of these names take a bigger hit right here. Qualcomm 184. That one looks like it's about to go red as well. Redwire, this was down 15% yesterday. Up a little 5%. As the Fed minutes will also be determining a lot later throughout the day. CoreWeave fighting for 86. Peng still up 15. It is quite surprising that a small cap like that can have this big of a day in the midst of some of this volatility. So, and this is a memory company with their AI factory. So it is proving that good earnings are getting rewarded. Again, we are getting into earnings season within the next 2 weeks or next week. We have banks, and then 2 weeks we have tech. So it's not like we don't have earnings coming up that will potentially change the tune of how the market's thinking of many of these names. Another quote from Trump: "We will probably hit Iran again tonight." So similar to what he said a few hours ago, which makes me think they're actually not going to hit Iran. But who knows at this point? Maybe they are. Shopify got an upgrade yesterday. That's down 5% as the software trade once again continues to get hit. 116. Yeah, if we lose 739 on SPY, then you look out below. And so far, we've done a really good job respecting 740. Meta 601, that's down 2. Meta looks like it wants to hold at least 600, but many of these names, they're retouching levels that they hit last week, and they're trying to respect those levels, but it's also like if they lose it, then they just lose it. ARM right here, back to 305. Airline stocks getting smacked. Yeah, so the oil trade would affect airlines and cruise lines. United, that's down 3.4. American Airlines probably down 2%. American Airlines down 5%. Carnival Cruise down 4.3. NCLH also down 3. I mean, the airlines and the cruise lines, you can buy when oil goes up and then sell as soon as oil comes down. It's been a pretty easy trade all year. But if they actually do strike tonight, I can't see how oil doesn't go up, right? If we legit strike, wow, crude's at 75. Oh, this is incredible. It was at 72.50 pre-market. I don't think we've checked it in the past hour. That's a 7% move on crude. I don't think we've had a 7% move to the upside in a few weeks. That, yeah, that is front-running the attacks tonight, I would imagine. And if we actually do have attacks, I wonder if that finds its way up to 80. Yeah, it definitely feels like it's front-running attacks. 7%. I don't think we've had a 7% in a minute. Even on the downside, we didn't have a 7% down day. We had like max 2 to 3%. And then we slowly got below 70. Nebius losing some momentum, 207.33. CoreWeave losing some momentum. And then Rocket Lab about to go red. That's also losing a ton of momentum. Silver and gold. Wow. Oh, no. Something deeper is happening here. Silver's down 5% today. Gold's down 3%. This is a little... I mean, I guess they should be down if oil goes up because they are not really inflation hedges anymore. They're risk-on plays. I mean, ever since gold had the move that it had back in January, along with silver when it was pushing 130, it feels like they turned into risk-on assets versus, hedges. But those are down a lot. So everything's taking a dump. Yeah, it feels, well, I mean, the semis have, no, Micron just went red. Okay. Interesting. Micron was holding 950. There you go, back down to 936. Why is SMH up? It's being held up by a few semi names, probably Broadcom and NVIDIA. TSM probably up today. TSM, yeah, TSM, Broadcom, and NVIDIA, I would imagine, are holding it up. but the rest of these are starting to get smacked here. Yeah, even ARM and Nebius, they were up a lot more than what they are right now. SMCI, that's up 2.4. I'm happy the semis are getting hit. It's time for the hyperbole run to step down. You know, it's interesting because one could argue that the semis getting hit is what the market needs to broaden, and it's what the market needs to, you know, stop the euphoric craziness that we're seeing in South Korea and all these other different places. But you could also say that it's a bear case for the broader market in general, not just for the semis. Because yes, if the semis, as the S&P takes a pretty ugly candle right there, if the semis get hit, it stops some of the euphoria. But I feel like it takes down a lot of stuff with it, just because of the leverage that we have. So, you know, the argument that we rotate into other stuff, like maybe that happens. But I mean, if we're rotating, why is Meta red? You know, why is Google red? Why is Amazon red? Why aren't those names, if we're truly rotating, having the momentum that the semis have had for the past month, or even like 1/10 of that momentum? Where's STRC? Where's Strategies Preferred Shares? 85. So again, the par value of these are 100. You're getting a 12% yield. You're now down 15% on them if you bought at 100. You're still getting that 12% yield. So effectively, the yield is 3%, which doesn't even beat inflation. So I don't know what Saylor's going to do. I mean, they said yesterday they're selling their Bitcoin to be able to fund the special dividends that they put out. But if Bitcoin keeps going down, it looks like they're going to have to, you know, keep selling it. AMD, are we still above 500? We are still above 500, 510. As many of these large caps are now flipping red. AMD was green for the majority of today. Gold should get to 3,000 in order to buy more. Dude, gold to 3,000 would be a hell of a drop from 4,035. When's the last time gold was 3,000? Last time gold was even close to that was, we're talking July 2025, and it was more like 3,400. So early 2025 is when you saw gold back at those 3,000 levels. I don't know if we get that again. VIX is up 12%. CoreWeave now taking a massive dump from the highs. Same with Nebius. SpaceX as well, kind of pegged right below 150 here. It doesn't really go below 149. Like, there's enough demand to keep it above that level, but it's not really getting above that either. And Trump is about to hold a news conference. Dude, how many, this is going to be his 5th conference today, as he's about to be live. It's going to be a different conference. He's going to be at a podium from where he was just at, where we were watching him.
That put forward. But of course, that sort of to detract from all the positivity potentially in the room is now the sort of question on Iran. I think for the Europeans, this is something they really did not want to make a centerpiece of this NATO meeting. The Europeans obviously want to have no part in the war in Iran. They have said that they could join a sort of peacekeeping mission within the Strait, the demining, that sort of thing. But it's not something they wanted to put front and center. And of course, the President of the United States did exactly that a few hours ago when he said that he believes the ceasefire is over and that he's going to probably resume striking Iran tonight.
All right, Ali, thank you so much. Continued coverage there from Ankara with Oliver Crook at the NATO summit. And we are awaiting, of course, President Trump's news conference. And for the latest on the NATO summit, do follow along on it.
Yeah, he's been streaming all day, as we can see right here. CoreWeave, are we about to lose 86? It's very close, 8 cents away. It looks like maybe 88 was the short-term top today. Nebius as well. Look at that, 212 to 203. Just absolutely getting wrecked across the board on a bunch of these names. AMD now losing 510. Trump would make bank if he had his own YouTube channel. Well, dude, he's making plenty of bank based on all these financial disclosures. He made $500 million on his meme coin. Think about that. 99% of people lost money on the President of the United States of America's meme coin. Meme coin. like a legit coin that is a meme, and Trump made $500 million. I mean, it's just astonishing, dude. It's just astonishing. The Dow is on its pace for its worst day since June 10th. How low is the Dow today? CoreWeave loses 86. The Dow down almost 2%, 52.1. So we're down about 900 points on the Dow. Fed minutes are coming at 2 p.m. So in about 3 hours. We'll see how the market reacts to that. Interesting. I mean, I can't even say like you go short here because we're holding 740 on the S&P. We lose 739. Maybe that's the short for the day. If we actually lose it, just lost 741. But this is where we should bounce or at least stop some of the bleeding. Rock Lab 82.58. ServiceNow, that's down 3. BlackBerry down 2. Nokia down 2. Micron. Okay, Micron's losing a decent chunk of that pump. 950 down. It's 930. What do you think about Netflix? I think Netflix, just like I said last week, is probably close to bottoming. I don't think they're taking Netflix to the 60s. And if they do, I think it's going to be a quick trip to the 60s. Having said that, I think the big tech names are trading at better multiples, but Netflix is a blue chip stock. It's like, at the end of the day, it's a very important company when it comes to media and entertainment, and they have, most of the IP and right licenses to be able to keep monetizing their base. It's just the overall trajectory of like growth in subscribers, I think, is the question. But you haven't had valuations like this on Netflix in over 3 years. So I do think it's close to bottoming. Kind of just gets stuck within a $3-4. If you look at Netflix's chart, there's a $3-4 range you get stuck in every couple months, and then it gets a breakout either to the downside or the upside. And I think right now it's stuck in that $70 to $78 range. But also, I mean, Netflix up to $85.90 after earnings, given all the bad news is priced in. I don't think that's crazy at all. I do not think that is crazy at all. I feel like that's actually pretty easy for Netflix to do. But I also think macro sentiment, along with, can they actually put up some decent growth numbers, will determine that. Micron 933. Oracle, I also think is, I mean, dude, the lowest price it got to this year was like 135. It's at 138. Did a round trip up to 250. This is probably one of the best neoclouds that's out there. If you believe in the neocloud thesis, it's just they're diluting and they're raising debt at a significant trajectory compared to the other ones because of the RPO that they have. And I think the street's not happy about that. CoreWeave, a little bit of green candle right there, up to 87.03. As Broadcom also continues to maintain its strength. Okay, if CoreWeave can get back to 88, maybe that was our bottom. It bounced right off VWAP as well, which is at 86.05. So got a clean test on that, bounced right above. And now if we get a new high for the day, maybe that was the pain. That means Micron would probably get back above 95. Do you have Oracle? Yes, I bought Oracle at 135 on April 13th. And we are right back. 138.60 on Mr. Oracle. What else? What else do we have? We talked about oil. I'm not going to be live at 2 p.m., so we're not going to stream the minutes. They're going to come out and we'll see how the market reacts, but we'll talk about them on the close. The minutes aren't, there's no press conference or anything. We'll just get a quote from the Fed and then we'll see how the market reacts to it. Talked about oil. Talked about all these Trump quotes. He's going to be live again in a second. Nvidia actually has a nice green candle. If that goes through 199, you're probably seeing CoreWeave and Nebius come through with it. Broadcom's been the big winner today. See a lot of people asking about Celsius. Jason did some TA on it yesterday. He doesn't love it, but he does think this is where nibbling would be okay. I don't know why they've taken a hit over the past 2 weeks. I mean, I know there's been some announcements with Pepsi and their distribution stuff, but or their distribution agreements with Pepsi. But yeah, this thing, it's tried. It's really tried ever since the acquisition, and the earnings were good. It's not like the earnings were bad on Celsius. It's just, I don't know if people are buying energy drinks right now in the, not people, but like I don't know if the market wants energy drinks as a sector to get exposure to when the AI trade continues to remain hot. Broadcom almost 389. That's almost getting back to intraday highs. Nvidia just got gutted back down to 196.90. But they are trying. Yeah, it's choppy. It is choppy. Choppy, choppy, choppy. What do you think about the Meta lawsuit? So Meta is getting sued for 1.4 trillion, which I don't think, I don't think that's a reasonable amount for them to pay, given their market cap is around 1.4 trillion. So the implication of them losing some of these lawsuits is basically the death of the company, which I don't think is going to happen, I would imagine. Yeah, Meta said in a court filing that 4 states were seeking 1.4 trillion in penalties over accusations the company designed its Facebook and Instagram platforms to addict young users and misled the public about their safety. I mean, I don't think Zuck is going to have to give up the whole company to pay those lawsuits. Nvidia, there's the move. Can she bring everyone else with her? I don't see any news on Nvidia. Oh, hold on. No, we got it. China plans to let top AI firms buy limited amounts of NVIDIA H200 chips. Oh my. That's good. China to let AI companies, the top AI firms in the country, buy NVIDIA H200 chips. Oh, that's really good. So now as long as the US doesn't have intense export controls, that if China's game for it, it's up to Lutnick and Trump now. That means Baba, Tencent, Baidu, all of those guys, which have been smuggling their GPUs over the past year, might get to just legally buy them from NVIDIA. Baba right there up 10.39%. Okay, but is that enough of a headline to get to 200, or is that so DeepSeek can re-engineer it? Well, the good thing is they're selling the H200s, not the Blackwells. So, hopefully it doesn't hit their IP that bad. Is that enough, though, guys? What do you think? Is that a real pump, or is that that's just another China headline that? I mean, there have been headlines like that. This is not from China. This is from The Information, so we have to confirm it. Pretty random to drop that today, especially after the DeepSeek news from yesterday. I don't know if that story is going to fully have legs, but if it does, it's bullish. More revenue for NVIDIA. Market can't be too upset about it, right? China approved chips are for training public data, not sensitive customer info, as per The Information. Well, Jensen's been trying to, red candle on NVIDIA. She's trying, but Jensen's been trying to convince the world that, you can't give up the Chinese stack of tech. And it's a, massive $50 billion market per year. So obviously it's good for NVIDIA shareholders, but it's also good for NVIDIA to be the default stack for China. He's not really succeeded in convincing the US about that. I think China would love to buy some of their chips, although China's trying to have a domestic chip ecosystem. They still also understand the value of that technology. I don't know, man. That was a random story to drop in the middle of a Wednesday. Could that really take us back up to 200? The implication of it is pretty bullish. But I don't know. SMCI can now legally sell them to its customers. Yeah. SMCI doesn't have to smuggle them anymore. SpaceX trying to lose 149. Every time it tries, it bounces. Lowest it got to was 147 for like a second. Broadcom 388. NVIDIA's supply constraints, so does this really matter? It's not like they're holding back supply at the moment. Yeah, it's a fair point. NVIDIA obviously is supply constrained, so the ability to sell into China would not be as easy. But from an investor perception perspective, a new line of revenue, even if it's not going to show up in the numbers today, is bullish. And also, I think Jensen would probably pull some strings if like the top Chinese companies wanted some chips, simply to keep good relationships with China and deliver the product. NVIDIA trying to go for 199 here. 199.30 is the top of the day. Yeah, that's true. More demand equals more pricing power for NVIDIA. That's also a fair point. And that could help out as well. Okay, 199.40. All right, Algo's doing their Algo thing right here. The problem is the other semis aren't really moving with it. So it kind of feels NVIDIA specific. The neoclouds are stuck. TSM is stuck. SMH is stuck. I don't know if... Goodness, dude. 199.45 to 198.53. Within 4 seconds, they took her down $1, which is $24 billion of market cap. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't know if this story is legit. I don't know. If it is, it might take a little bit of more time to get officially priced in. Where is Palantir? Palantir 128. That one's also stuck. Oracle down, and then Celsius down. Nebius and CoreWeave still stuck. Is Trump live? As he delivers a new conference, not yet. But he is about to be. Bloomberg TV just announced it. Yeah, here it is. Right. Let me pull this up, as I believe they're talking about it here.
A few times this morning.
We are going to see further U.S. strikes using the U.S. does follow through with its threats for further strikes on the country. And it hasn't just been escalation when it comes to kinetic action, but we're also seeing just yesterday, the U.S. Treasury Department moving to revoke that critical waiver when it comes to allowing Iran to sell its crude to market. So the U.S. is now taking that further stance when it comes to squeezing Iran on the economic front, as it appears that these negotiations at this point have really been stalled. Now, even with all of this said, Ed, President Trump here is saying that he thinks the ceasefire is over, but he did leave open that pathway that negotiations could continue. He said that he wasn't going to stop his diplomatic team from trying, at least. But in his opinion and in his words, he thinks at this point it's just not worth that effort.
Saying he doesn't see it happening with the Iranians. And in new comments, guys, just in the last half hour, the president is now backing off the idea that Iran needs to hand over its nuclear material. Take a listen.
We've already got the nuclear material because it's so far underground, nobody's going to be able to get it except us, because we have the equipment that can get it. But I call it the nuclear dust. The nuclear material is so far down underneath the mountain, and now that's been determined, that it would take massive machinery that we have that no other country has.
Mr.
They can't
President,
get
so
it.
you have no plans to go in, boots on the ground?
Why would I go in now?
You'll remember one of the president's stated goals of starting this war was curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions, and he has long said that the United States would be taking Iran's nuclear material. In the MOU, the U.S. softened that stance slightly, said the nuclear material would be downgraded on site, but now the president is conceding even further. He's suggesting now that the nuclear material is inaccessible and that might be good enough for him. As for the Iranians, they are now warning in state-owned media that they will be retaliating against any further attacks. Iran's press TV saying Iran's new strategy will be to fully close the Strait of Hormuz in response to any strike. Guys.
Megan, what do you make of the timing of all of this? For one, you have oil that had just gotten below pre-war levels. You also have the backdrop of the NATO summit. I mean, is there anything to that?
There could be. We know that the White House and the president watches these oil markets very closely. He was asked about prices today, and he sort of said it wasn't a big deal, that, it's just up, he says, $2 at that time from where it was. It could be something to that, in that He saw the big drop in oil prices and felt like it was okay then to reignite tensions. There also could be something to that. He's at this NATO summit and he's feeling very much like the U.S. stands alone. He's very angry at all of these European allies, as he has been for months now, for not standing with the U.S. and having our back, as he says, in this war. That could be leading him to lash out a little bit, clearly frustrated, and now these frustrations bubbling over, feeling like he doesn't have any other options, that the negotiations aren't getting anywhere, and now he wants to act strong once again. And the best way he knows to do that is to threaten and move forward with further strikes.
Megan, thank you very much. Megan Casella watching some of the geopolitics this morning. Let's get to the impact on oil prices as well. Pippa Stevens covering that. Pippa, and to Megan's point, some of this front end action at least is interesting.
That's right, Carl. So the narrative in oil had turned notably bearish, with traders pricing in an oversupplied market. But this latest escalation changing the calculus on when flows through the strait can return to normal. In theory, every renewed attack on commercial shipping further erodes confidence in the strait's reopening, notes Kepler, making each future recovery more fragile than the last. WTI up 7% here, and European natural gas prices up 8% this week, getting back towards that 50 euros per megawatt hour level after a Qatari LNG vessel was struck in the strait. But it is fuel prices that continue to see the largest gains, because while a flood of oil has hit the market as ships exited, spare refining capacity is limited. The 3-2-1 crack spread is now around $60, up from $20 at the start of the year. China is reportedly lifting its fuel export restrictions this month, according to Reuters, citing sources which could help. But it also comes as Ukraine ramps up its attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, hitting the country's largest refiner. Finally, shipping rates for very large crude carriers rising in the escalation's aftermath, now at $10.14 per barrel for Arab Light, heading from the Gulf to Asia Pacific. That's according to Argus Media. That is below the early June peak of just under $18, but more than 4 times what it was at the start of the year. Guys?
Meantime, Pippa, we talked with Mark Esper this morning, former defense secretary, who did say that some of these international maritime organizations aren't recommending or even guaranteeing safety if a shipper were to cross through the strait.
That's right. And we've seen that the insurance markets continue to be a sticky point here. And to your point, we heard from the International Maritime Organization, which earlier, urged state ship owners and operators to avoid exposing seafarers to what they called unnecessary danger by transiting the strait. We also had the Joint Maritime Information Center increase the risk of sending ships through the strait from substantial to severe. So clearly casting some doubt there on whether owners will want to send their ships through. But I did also just want to point out that we just got the latest inventory report for levels here in the U.S. Another big draw in both gasoline and distillates. Distillates, which is a proxy for diesel, down by 5 million barrels. That's now about 12% below the 5-year average. And total exports did fall slightly to 11.9 million barrels per day, but product exports hitting a record last week at 8.7 million barrels today. So once again, the 2 years ago, the product exports were 6.5 million barrels a day. So that's up more than 2 million barrels per day. And once again, showing that the U.S. really is now becoming the global supplier, not just for oil, but also on these very tight product markets.
Yeah.
All right, so the oil news continues to be ugly in regards to supply-demand imbalances. Obviously, Trump saying what he said today didn't help. That NVIDIA China news, we got to 199.45 and then just had the move faded. We did get a bounce from 196 on that headline, so a couple bucks, not too bad, but obviously, actually 196.80, so it's about $1.20. It just couldn't hold. Just could not hold. Is Bloom Energy dumping? Bloom Energy is dumping. That's down 8%. T1, wow, down another 4. Dude, this was down 20% yesterday. Sharon AI, this is one of the companies that was working with NVIDIA for their new NeoCloud project. That's down 2%. It was down 10% yesterday. Just have all of these AI either adjacent plays or beneficiaries not getting the bid right here. Micron back to 936, so they're not taking her down to the low 900s. Yet they are still pretty red. VG is up 8%, VG being the hedge today. I think July is going to be a rough month. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in June. We talked about the summer historically not being the best for momentum. And we're kind of experiencing it right here. But how bad does it get? Like, does it get March low bad? You know, do we see Robinhood back at 70, CoreWeave at 65? Like, do we get that type of pain, which would put NVIDIA back at like 175, 180? I mean, the earnings would make NVIDIA trade at like 10 times forward if we get to those levels. Do we have any level of meaningful rotation? I think Trump is crying war to save the 10-year auction note. If that came weak, there would be a sell-off in the market. That's a fair point. I kind of wonder, though, if oil prices going up and that 10-year rising is enough to make the auction productive. Wow, Brent just hit above 80. Goodness gracious. All right, so now you're seeing all parts of the stack get hit. But yeah, maybe that's his plan. Spook the markets, get the 10-year to pump, have a good auction, and then negotiate an extension to the ceasefire. I mean, it would be really, really funny if tomorrow Trump comes out and is like, yeah, things are going well with the Iranians. You know, I just had lunch with the Ayatollah. We talked about a bunch of things. And I think we're close to a deal. As Broadcom almost hits 390. Like, would that even surprise anybody if that's the headline tomorrow? The Trump accounts are taking a hit already. Oh my gosh, dude. The Trump accounts. I really wonder, like, if JD Vance wins in 2028, the Trump accounts will probably still be called the Trump accounts. But if, like, Newsom wins, I think he might change the name of the Trump account. Like, I think he would have the executive order to be like, we're going to call these the financial youth accounts or something instead of the Trump accounts. But it would be funny if those Trump accounts just continue to be called Trump accounts. Amid sending you to negotiate is not off the table. They don't want me to. I think they don't want me to get a deal. I feel like they like the drama of this happening. Because again, I feel like I could have resolved this ages ago. But they don't want me to. Newsom will never win. The Democratic nominees that are in the front running on Polymarket are AOC, Newsom, and Kamala Harris. For the Republicans, it's Vance, Rubio. There's the third guy. I forgot the third guy. But it was Vance and Rubio in 1 and 2, and Vance is now number 1. Josh Shapiro is also on the Democrat list. So we got another couple of years, but really we don't have a couple of years. I mean, by the end of this year, early next year, we should know, because then you have to do a year of campaigning, right? So like I would feel by at least mid 2027, we'll have a good indication of who the Democrats are going to at least have to be their front runners. I think, you know, for the Republicans, it's obviously Rubio and Vance are in the lead. And then we're going to see what 2028 ends up looking like. Do you think AOC really has a chance? I don't know, but she's up there in the polls. Like at the end of the day, if you're in the polls, you know, you are part of the mainstream discussion. I don't know. I don't know if people will necessarily vibe with a lot of her ideas, but you know, this is what we've covered on the show for the past couple of months. There is a lot of sentiment that is anti-AI. Like there's a lot of people that just don't like it and don't think that it's productive. They don't think there's any economic mobility from it. They see Elon being worth $1 trillion and, you know, obviously feels that it's unfair to society and there's not really any distribution of wealth. So tapping into those feelings that people have politically can absolutely spark a campaign. What else do we have? Is that it? Are we just going to chop for the rest of the day? CoreWeave's stuck at 85. SoFi's been stuck at 1720. Amazon, at least Amazon's not in the 220s anymore. At least we're somewhat in our senses. Amazon above 240. And everything else seems to be relatively stuck from those highs we hit, or down from the highs that we hit at around 10 a.m. SMCI up 1.4. Trump is supposed to go live again. The White House has the stream up. I don't think he's going to say anything we don't know at this point. Like, he's talked for the past few hours. TerraWolf CEO talking about the Anthropic agreement they got yesterday. See if we can get some insight into what he's saying about the data center build out.
Important. We have great quality sites, so we're looking for a long-term, high-quality credit as an off-taker. We had a reference design; they were familiar with us. We worked with them; it just seemed like the right thing. And 20 years is a best-in-class lease in this space right now.
So I also wanted to touch on some of the concerns because, again, reading through the reaction on Wall Street, obviously you saw a lot of that come through in the share movement yesterday. But there is still this concern around here that, okay, you secured this deal with Anthropic, but your customer concentration could be a longer-term concern. So give us the roadmap about, how you begin to address this and how you keep that momentum going.
I don't share that concern. At our Lake Mariner facility, where our customers fluid stack backed by a Google credit backstop. It's pretty fantastic. Now here we've got a direct lease with Anthropic. I think it's one of the first things they've gone direct on, certainly for this term. They're a great credit. We'll have the lease provides for terms that enable us to get an investment grade backstop. Anthropic has a number of offers. They have to make a decision on whose equipment they want to use, but at the end of the day, this will be an investment grade backstop. Provisions in the lease mandate that, and all systems are go. We're very excited about building out this facility.
I'm curious, Paul, when you bought that center out there in Kentucky, did you already kind of know that Anthropic was going to come on board?
We knew that they were very keen on the site. We had a number of other customers that were interested in the site. We run a process. For us, it's all about getting the best deal we can for our shareholders. But at the end of the day, Anthropic put the most superior deal on the table.
Wow. All right, folks. This is part of the reason you're seeing the red candles that are fresh red candles. S&P very close to losing 740. Wall Street Journal, Trump has asked his team at NATO to officially cut off trade with Spain. Trump asked to get a list of Spanish goods to consider for embargo. The Treasury will be working with United States trade representatives and the Commerce Department to provide the president a menu of Spanish products that may be embargoed in the coming days. The reason we pumped in the morning off the pre-market lows was because of a Reuters report saying that although Trump publicly said that he doesn't want to do trade with Spain anymore, he didn't actually privately talk about seriously getting rid of the $40 billion of trade we do with Spain to any of his colleagues inside of the summit. Now the Wall Street Journal is reporting, no, he's like legit trying to cut off trade with the Spaniards here. And I don't think the market likes that at all. You have your fresh lows of the day, 740. There she goes. NVIDIA lost that entire China pump. Completely gone now. Marvell, that's getting hit. Where's Micron? Are we at 930? We are at 923. Up, that will do it for you. Trump will be working. No, the Treasury will be working with the trade representatives in the U.S. to provide POTUS a menu of Spanish products that can be embargoed. That means they're like legit trying to look at what they can do to stop trade relations, at least in the short term, with Spain. Are they mad that Spain is advancing the World Cup and we couldn't beat Belgium? Is that the real reason for this? Okay, let's ask Gemini. What are the main products that the U.S. imports and exports into Spain? What is the reason for this? The reason for this is because Trump said that Spain didn't help during the Iran war. That was the main reason. While I pull that up from Gemini, here's what Trump said earlier this morning at that conference.
And I want to thank Mark. They were unwilling to help us. Now, in all fairness, I didn't speak to Mark about it. I think if I did, it might have been different, but we didn't need help. But I was really testing. I wanted to see whether or not they'd be there. And the answer is they were. I spoke to Germany. I spoke to France. Spoke to UK. spoke to Italy. I didn't speak to Spain. Spain is a wasted cause. We don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore, by the way. I'd like you to cut it off. Spain is a terrible partner in NATO. They don't participate. They don't pay. I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain, please, including visits. Okay, we don't want anything to do. Watch them come running back. Oh, they'll come running back. They treat this man terribly, and this man's a good man too, great man. They're lucky they have him. But Spain doesn't agree to anything, and you shouldn't carry him. I mean, you sort of automatically carry because you're protecting an area, so they're there. So they probably figure they have to protect us, right? But we don't have to. We don't have to trade with them. I don't want to do any more trade with them. All right? Take it.
So he said that. I don't think the market took it seriously because he's talked bad about Spain before. But the Wall Street Journal here reporting that the Treasury Department is seriously looking into following these requests. So here's what Gemini says. 47 billion is the approximate agreement between the U.S. and Spain. The U.S. typically maintains a trade surplus with Spain, exporting around 26.4 billion and importing 21.3. We export mineral fuels and energy, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, electronics and semiconductors, and agricultural products. What we buy from Spain are refined petroleum, consumer goods like tiles, footwear, steel, pharmaceuticals and chemicals, electrical equipment, and machinery and industrial equipment, along with oils and agricultural goods. Spain is a massive supplier of olive oil, which alone accounts for over $1 billion in trade, along with processed fruits, vegetables, nuts, and wine. Okay, do we actually think we're going to stop trading with Spain? I feel like Trump's doing this to, grandstand and force the Spanish prime minister to come out and say that we want to maintain a relationship. Basically, I think he's trying to get Spain to kiss the ring. S&P, at least respecting 740, was very close to losing it, and we got our bounce up to 741. But that headline immediately made it test. I mean, my gut tells me we're not actually going to stop trading with Spain. Like, China's a different story. The tariffs were a different story. This is Trump upset that Spain didn't assist with NATO and didn't assist with their air bases when he asked them for it in the middle of March. Yeah, we need the olive oil. I don't know if that easily gets away. By the way, the NATO Secretary General was actually he was on Trump's side about needing to attack Iran, and he's not necessarily saying that Trump did the wrong thing here.
It's absolutely necessary because when you have a ceasefire and Iran is basically violating the ceasefire, we see what happened yesterday with ships being attacked. I think it is totally crucial that the US forcefully reacts. I also expect allies today to discuss Iran. I expect allies today to reconfirm that Iran should never, ever get its hand on a nuclear capability. And secondly, that the principle of the freedom of navigation, so the Strait of Hormuz completely opening up again, is a sine qua non, is crucial for all 32 allies. I think
that's also part of the reason why Trump feels confident to stop trading with Spain. He does have some of the higher elites in NATO on his side. I don't know if they're going to support this exact move, but they might not disavow it. Micron losing it all. 914 here. 959 to 914. Goodness. If we go below 900, then Nebia's probably below 200. CoreWeave, which is now at 84. CoreWeave probably back down to the low 80 range. Hood trying to hold above 109. T1 Energy down 7%. But maybe he feels emboldened now to actually try to get these Spanish goods embargoed. AMD, did we lose 500? Oh, there she goes. This is feeling exactly like yesterday. Exactly like yesterday, where you had that short-term top. Micron was about $20 higher than where it was yesterday. Yesterday it topped out at 930, 927. But then it rebounded to 940, and then it officially started going back down. So maybe there is one more bounce before we get red up. S&P, this might actually stop that bounce from happening. We are 5 cents away from losing 740. 739 was the pre-market low, folks. If we lose that low, I would imagine we're going lower if that happens. At that point, you would have a lot of stop losses starting to get hit, which would just compound the selling. Palantir 128, Celsius 30, Nvidia back down to where it was before the China news. The China news was so random, dude. In the middle of the day, felt like it was an attempt to get this to move, but couldn't. Even Broadcom losing $7 from the highs on that Spain news. SoFi was 1892 a few days ago. 1714 now. 735 is the bounce. Yeah, Jason said that yesterday as well. There we go, below 740. All right, so there's obviously a lot of pain between 739 and 735. 735 is the bounce. We lose 735. I don't even want to know what's going to happen today if that happens. I don't think that. I feel like if we were to lose it, it would happen tomorrow. I don't think they give us all of that red in one day, given how much red we're already seeing. And, you know, there should be some decent support here, but if not, feels like we're going lower. It's ugly. It's ugly. Is Micron down, do you think, because of SK Hynix? Micron's down because I think the AI trade is being exhausted, particularly the memory trade. SK Hynix, I'm really confused on how that IPO is going to go, but I wonder if that takes away some of the momentum from Micron as well, just because people would rather trade a different memory name. But no, I don't think it's down because of SK Hynix. I think it's down for other reasons. You also had a few sell-side analysts come out yesterday saying they maintain their Micron target, but they're like trying to talk to investors about why the hesitation of the trade continues to exist. And all of them, you know, continue to remain overweight, like D.A. Davidson, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America. But, I mean, they are acknowledging, hey, the thing has gone up a lot this year, and at some point it's going to consolidate. And so they said this is an opportunity to get more exposure, but they also understand why the market is taking a breather on these trades. VIX now up 14. Costco is up. Let's see if we have some other headline. Let me pull up the article, actually. Wall Street Journal, Spain. Let's see what they said. Let's see what quotes they have, too. Who did they get these sources from? Wall Street Journal, Trump, Spanish goods embargo. Okay, so Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez later said his country's relationship with the U.S. is very positive and noted that trade negotiations within the EU, of which Spain is a member, can only take place at the level of the bloc institutions. Madrid-listed banks are down 4% today, as Trump says we don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore. I don't see their source on where they got the embargo news, but that headline alone is why we're seeing this red. Trump's about to be live again. I mean, maybe he's going to talk about Spain in this one. Iran and Spain. I thought Cuba was supposed to be the next target. It's back to Iran, and now we have Spain. Costco, where are we at on Costco? 960. Yeah, this is it's definitely an interesting way to start out July. A lot of it just feels so fake, man. I mean, like, yes, the AI trade is exhausted, but the fundamental reason to sell off all these names is CapEx is slowing down. Like, it really just comes back to CapEx slowing down, and it's not. Like, it's just, there's zero indication that it is. Now, the first sniff of it, it'll be ugly. But even the T1 energies of the world benefit from CapEx going up because that's more money being spent on energy, even if they specifically aren't the beneficiaries in the short term. But T1 energy is being priced as if CapEx is just not happening anymore, which is confusing. CoreWeave trying to get back above 85. Do you think the Fed minutes will do anything? No. I actually think the Fed minutes could be bearish if a majority of the Fed participants still bring up inflation as their largest concern. Now, granted, the Fed minutes are coming after oil has gone down by $20, so maybe it's bullish because those concerns have been alleviated to some extent. But if not, the Fed minutes definitely could be bearish. Intel, I wonder if she goes below 100, 104.70. 140 to 104. When did it hit 140? I think that was the short-term top for the entire market. June 30th. Well, June 2nd was NVIDIA's top. June 30th looks like it's in Intel's. When did Nebius get to 298? June 18th. Okay, so mid-June-ish is when most of these names started taking a break. I think T1 Energy is down because they were supposed to secure funding for their factory by end of Q2. They haven't announced anything, so the price action is rational. I mean, that is fair. Them not being able to secure funding is similar to NeoClouds not being able to get a deal. So if your entire thesis on the stock is rooted in that one argument and that doesn't come to fruition, then probably makes sense for these stocks to get hit. Where's the heat map? We haven't looked at that today either. Where am I in the stock draft too? I got to be getting clobbered. I'm still number 4. Shout out to Chris and Jason. Somehow they're a little lower than me, but it's like by 1%, so it's not even that serious. But there's a big gap between me, Chris, and Jason, and then Steve, Tanner, and Matt. Steve's only down 4. Me, Chris, and Jason are down 11 to 12, which means you could basically interchange me, Chris, and Jason. And then Matt's barely down 1%. So the most high beta of high beta portfolios obviously are getting wrecked right here. Here's the heat map. It's pretty ugly across the board. I mean, energy's up, obviously, because oil's up. Consumer defensives are up a little bit. But yesterday, it was mainly just semis. Today, it feels like it's everything. It's stockdraft.com for those that want to go through it. Stockdraft.com. Yeah, it's not just the semis here today or the hyperscalers. We're trying to get a little pump on SPY, 740.24. So maybe 739.50 is your bounce. But whatever Trump's about to say might change that. This gold is still down 2%. I don't think we factored in Jason's Honeywell split. I think we still have to do that there. Okay, a little bit of a bounce. The slightest of slightest bounces here. Google, unfortunately, kind of falling off a cliff. Google not getting any bounce, 360.5. It was at 338 a few weeks ago. Pumped up to 375 and basically $10 above Berkshire's price on the private equity or the equity issuance that they put out at 350. AMD back above 504. So again, there's that little bounce, 498 to 504. Or we're still pretty red. All right, folks, I think that is it for today. I have no idea when Trump's going to be live. It might be another 30 minutes till he goes live. So we're going to see if he has any new quotes. The Spain news about actually embargoing their products, I think, was the final nail in the coffin today for the markets to really lose a lot of chances of flipping. Now, granted, it could reverse if Trump says anything in this press conference that is semi-bullish, but it's just been a host of bad news all day, really led by Donnie T. Oracle right there, 137.92. All right, that is it for me. That is it for me. Let's do word of the day. I'll be back on the close. I'm sure Steve will probably stream Trump's announcements. So whenever he does go live, which might be in an hour, might be in 30 minutes, you'll be able to see it. But I don't know, man. Today is an ugly day, and it's ugly for reasons that are once again rooted at the source of this conflict that has just annoyed, so much of us over the past year, which has been Iran. And it doesn't look like that is changing anytime soon. All right, word of the day. Let's do this. Let's see what we got. See what we've got. Aporia. Aporia. The state of genuine doubt, uncertainty, or intellectual puzzlement, especially when faced with conflicting evidence. The conflicting economic data left investors in aporia, unsure whether growth was accelerating or slowing. Okay, this one is not too bad. We got 2 words in a row. Aporia.
Aporia. Aporia.
I think that's definitely what we're experiencing today. A state of confusion and puzzlement over how the equity markets are reacting to this news. All right, I will be back on the market close. We will keep going from there. We can spam Mr. Steve's stream. Put the link right here in the chat with aporia. Which means to be confused. And we'll be back on the close. Do we have any earnings today? Do we have any earnings? Levi's after the bell. All right, so we'll be back for the close. We'll see what Trump says on this conference, see if anything changes with this Spain news. Get through some earnings, and then we'll keep going from there. All right, thank you, everybody. I'll see you guys in a few hours for the market close. All right, buddy. Have a good one.